I have attempted suicide more times than I can count on my hands. It began for me at the age of 17 years old. Was my first attempt in 2001, and my last attempt would have been in 2016. I have required surgery, and I'm extremely lucky to be here today. Growing up, mental health and suicide and how you were feeling isn't something we really talked about. So I grew up with a lot of verbal abuse in my youth, and it instilled in me a lot of doubt, self-doubt. And so it always affected my ability to be outgoing or make friends or just be comfortable meeting new people, because I believed I was stupid or I was never going to be anything.
Women attempt suicide more often than men, and yet they're not dying as frequently as men. Well, men aren't asking for help, right? Because maybe they can ask for help. So women, clearly, it looks to me like they're asking for help.
Okay.
Because they're not dying.
Okay.
If you're dying, you're not asking for help. You're done. So I think that's part of what it is men don't have the ability to ask for help. And maybe that's why they take more lethal means.
Has the help helped, right? Because on one side, we're reluctant to help. On the other side, is the help sufficient? Mm-hmm. Is it working, right? Has it really saved anybody's life? Or is there more that needs to be done, right? In these conversations with men's mental health and with Movember, we're always saying, share your story, reach out for help. It's okay to cry, right? Is it enough though? Is society doing enough? Because do men need to be better at reaching out, or does society need to be better at reaching out to men?
I want you in the dark of the dark places to say your name. Nobody can take that from you. And in your name, you have strength. What do you want your name to mean? And if you've got something that's bothering you, you've got to ask yourself, what character do I want to be? Am I going to be a weak person? Am I going to be a strong person? Am I going to survive this? Also realize there's a time and a season for everything. Not everything's going to stay the same. So how you're going to come out the other side is also up to you.
My perspective when it comes to why men suffer so much, and just based on my own experiences and my own inner work looking within myself after my divorce, that flipped my entire world upside down, really. Becoming a father for the first time and not knowing how that was going to go, like fucking up basically since day one.
Unfortunately, down the road, you end up being the bully. And you start using it for all the wrong reasons. They were right at the time. They protected you. But so learning about my manhood, I'm still learning that.
Sometimes we're misguided by either our fathers or a lack of a father in many communities or in many people's personal circumstances. And we're left to kind of figure out what does being a man really mean or look like, right? We're left to things like Hollywood. We're left to the schoolyard. And without proper guidance and without proper acceptance from society and from community, we're left to figure it out all alone.
August 16th, my son passed away. I don't want to get into too many details of that, but my son passed away, and that was extremely hard for me to deal with. I did not think I was going to get through that.
I've seen the way we treat mental health patients, and I've seen the life that the vast majority of people with mental health, especially if you have severe mental health, how we're treated in our society. We're not good with mental health. If you got cancer, everybody's around you to support you in the whole bit. If you're schizophrenic or any other kind of severe mental health issue, you're a pariah. People don't want to be around you.
We are men, but we're also human. We have hearts that are both soft and hard. We are learning how to do all of the things the right way. As a male, I'm sorry for the mistakes that we have made. And as an individual, I'm sorry for the mistakes that I have made. As a male, I will tell you that I possess all of the courage, all of the strength, all of the intellect, and all of the ability to overcome the things that are presented to me. And I believe in the men that are around me to do so because I'm in their space as well. So if you are a male and you're hearing this and you're alone, what I'll tell you is you're not alone. You're not the first, you won't be the last, but I believe in you to be the best person for yourself to see yourself through. Live your life in such a way that it is evidence and proof that their way of doing it was wrong. I look forward to the moment I get to see my father next. When I get to see him next, I get to say, thank you for all the things you gave me and all the things you didn't give me. My community labeled me the Citizen of the Year. What does that mean to you? How did we get there? And what is missing? Wouldn't it have been cool if there were two of us? Imagine if I'm so good doing all these things that I'm doing by myself. Imagine if you're doing those things too, Dad. So what I'm saying is, we can identify what we don't like. We can have a challenge with the previous generation. But in the life that we have now, I don't think it's fully fair to, unless your soul needs it, to really force yourself to commit to living a resolution for something that's past. If they want to be there, they're going to be there. I'm going to go give it an invitation, but I'm not going to spend the time chasing it down. If you know that you suffered something as a child and that person hasn't shown you the self-awareness, because that's the first step, because how can I tell you that this hurt me if you never thought you hurt me? Maybe it's not worth the distance between us for me to hold on to this dumb ideology that I noticed didn't even serve you. I'm so proud of you, my child. You did better than I did. Can we be equals? Tell me how you did the thing that you did. Can I bask in this wonderful thing that you've become? Like, it's a very challenging thing to say, but I wouldn't chase it, man, because they didn't chase you.
By me sharing my story and continuing to share my story, it allows me to get these thoughts off of my chest, get these emotions off of my chest, and it allows me to really understand that it's okay that I'm feeling this way. It's okay what I've been through, and it's okay to be sad and cry, but I still need to move forward with my life.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for our third annual Movember discussion panel on men's mental health. This is a time of year for all of us to reflect on our brothers, fathers, husbands, colleagues, and friends in need, regardless of how loud and quiet they are about it. We have all heard the term that men often suffer in silence, and we hope over the next 90 minutes we can add a little noise to that silence with these gentlemen who have stepped forward to join me here today. Myself, my name is Acie Tran, and I will be moderating as well as contributing to today's discussion panel. I've been advocating for men's mental health for 8 years now, and I lead the Ottawa Dads Group, an active community of 1,200 local dads. I am the host of the Unmanly podcast and produce content on YouTube under my Coach Acie channel. On both of these platforms, I aim to raise awareness to the unique problems that men face when it comes to their own concept of masculinity and mental well-being. My reason for doing this work is that I hope to intervene with men who suffer in silence before their suffering manifests itself into violence either against themselves or to other people. We've seen it too many times, so many lives lost and affected by violence, abuse, and suicide, and I hope to do my part in shedding light on these issues to better understand and prevent any more heartbreaking stories. This year in particular, we will be focusing on suicide and suicide prevention, and in the second portion of our panel, we will be discussing the role of masculinity in society and fatherhood topics such as bullying in schools and generational trauma. These are important topics that are not discussed enough, and I'm setting the following intentions for today's discussion. Number one, we're going to share our experiences as raw and authentically as possible. Number two, we intend to keep this conversation going and to inspire you, our audience, to continue this conversation beyond these 90 minutes and beyond the month of November in your families and your circles. And number three, to learn and share information on suicide awareness and prevention that could potentially save a life. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to state that some may find the nature of this conversation triggering due to the heavy subject matter. I just want you to know that you are seen and heard. If you are having thoughts of ideation or know someone who is having thoughts of ideation, please reach out to help by notifying the appropriate authorities and emergency resources in your area. I also wanted to clarify that neither of us up here are licensed psychological professionals. We are just a group of guys speaking courageously and authentically. If you need to reach out to a professional, then it is highly recommended that you do so in your unique situation. And I'd now like to take this opportunity to introduce you to this year's panelists who will be joining me in this important conversation. First, we have John Tattersall, who is a 58-year-old massage therapist who has been practicing for over 30 years. He is a husband and a father of 2 adult children. He has multiple passions ranging from politics to spirituality and men's issues. Throughout his life, he has felt a calling to an improved voice for men. He hopes to be a leader and developer in that quest and believes it will be through a collective voice that this will be achieved. John is about to launch a podcast on men's mental health titled Hands of a Man. Hands of a Man was created with the hope to be a vehicle that gives a voice to male concerns and experiences in their lives. A voice that acknowledges all of us and our contributions to society. Thank you for joining us today, John.
Thanks.
Up next, Lee Theodore. Lee Theodore is a first-generation Canadian who was born in Edmonton, Alberta, to Haitian parents. His Haitian heritage is his foundation. With it, he has navigated a life spanning Alberta at birth to his life in Ontario. A proud resident of Eastern Ontario, Lee Theodore is presently Cornwall Citizen of the Year for notable contributions of time, service, and collaborations of merit in diversity and volunteerism. A proud former proprietor of the Spicy Pearl in Cornwall, the first Caribbean restaurant in the Eastern Ontario region, Lee joins us today as a proud father of a 5-year-old girl. Additionally, he encourages young people to participate in volunteering, networking, and creative innovation by actively participating in his community. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Finally, Derek Giffen is 38 and a mental health and awareness advocate. He is the creator and co-founder of the Suicide Awareness Movement, or SAM. He has quite the story, so I won't get into it too much here, but SAM was founded to encourage others to share their story, to show those struggling they are not alone, and to continue to educate himself and others on mental illnesses, coping skills, and reducing the stigma around mental health. He relocated to Nunavik in northern Canada, a community with the highest suicide rates in all of Canada, to continue his work as a member of the Suicide Prevention Committee. His miraculous and inspiring story has been documented widely by news outlets and documentaries, and we are grateful to have him here today to share his story. Thank you, Derek, for joining us.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
We're actually going to start the panel by giving the floor to you, Derek, to share your story, a story that you've shared all across the country. And I'm very honored to be able to have you here today to share your story with us and to bless our panel. So Derek, the floor is yours, and you can take as long as you need.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who's here today, everything that's gone into this production. I'll do my best to not move. This is my first time on a setting like this, on a podcast type situation, so it's a little different. My doctor told me I really shouldn't be doing things that cause anxiety, and I'm pretty sure this is one of the things that he had in mind. So I'm definitely feeling anxious at the moment, and I might be a little jittery as I begin my story, but I will settle down a little bit as we get into it. I have attempted suicide more times than I can count on my hands. It began for me at the age of 17 years old. Was my first attempt in 2001, and my last attempt would have been in 2016. I have required surgery, and I'm extremely lucky to be here today. Growing up, mental health and suicide and how you were feeling isn't something we really talked about. My childhood wasn't unlike most people's childhoods. There was a lot of trauma that I did endure, but on the outside, it appeared normal. It appeared that I had a normal childhood. We had Christmases. We celebrated. The family was kind of close, but my mother was very sick. So I grew up with a lot of verbal abuse in my youth, and it instilled in me a lot of doubt, self-doubt. And in elementary school and throughout school, I had very, very low self-esteem. And so it always affected my ability to be outgoing or make friends or just be comfortable meeting new people, because I believed I was stupid or I was never going to be anything, right? And so it always affected me to grow as a normal human being, and I wasn't able to build proper relationships with people. In my youth, my mother, she did her best, but she did allow a lot of bad things to happen to me. I love my mother very much, but I do struggle with forgiving her for some of the things that have happened to me, including sexual abuse. I was molested in my youth, which made it extremely difficult to talk about to my friends. It's something that I was never really able to talk about. So I always carried that feeling around with me that I was different than everybody else, that I've been through something that nobody else has gone through, and I can't talk about it because I felt people were going to make fun of me for some of the things that I did, right? And so it created a lot of anger inside of me, so I became very resentful towards my mother. I started acting out a lot, leading to drugs and relying on vices and substances to cope with whatever pain I was going through at that time. And I'm talking young. By 13 years old, we were smoking marijuana every day. And I used that as a coping mechanism, not only for myself, but as a way I could make friends. I can fit in. I could be cool. I could be part of the club because I'm going to smoke weed with the boys, right? But it was bad. It was against really what I wanted to do. And then growing up, going into high school, and after elementary school, going into high school, I just thought I was different. I didn't understand why, when I was upset, I wanted to hurt myself. If something upset me, the first thing I wanted to do was punch myself, right? And so I would do that. I would hurt myself, and then I would have to create all these stories to explain why I have these black eyes. And so I wasn't able to be myself throughout high school, and I always had to create a false scenario of what I was really experiencing, and it didn't allow me to grow naturally as a human because I was consistently stuck in this, trying to hide this trauma. Now and then, a girlfriend dumped me, and that would be my first attempt in 2001. After a girlfriend dumped me. Some people may be like, well, that's a kind of silly reason to want to harm yourself. But for me at that time, it was the worst thing I could go through. I lost everything. It was the one thing I felt good about, right? I struggled in my childhood, and I struggled to make friends, and now finally there's this person that wants to be with me. And eventually she didn't, because of all this trauma that I was going through. I wasn't necessarily the best individual to be around, from jealousy and controlling, manipulating behaviors. So of course she wouldn't want to be with me, and we broke up, and I eventually attempted suicide. I was able to recover from that. On the outside, I was able to live a normal life. I was able to get jobs. I was able to be happy. I was telling jokes. I would be the life of the party, but inside I was hurting a lot. And it was something I would take home with me, because in a social setting, it's not something I was really able to speak about. So I would take these pains and feelings home with me until I was alone with my own thoughts, with my own feelings. And over time, they would develop very negatively, and they would eventually lead to depression and suicidal ideation. And I would act on those because I didn't have anyone to turn to. I didn't know where to turn to, and I didn't know what to do back then. And because it was something that I couldn't talk about. I couldn't go to my peers or anybody that I felt cared about me and tell them that I want to hurt myself. I'm in pain. I'm sad. I don't know how to function. I don't want to get out of bed today. And there was nobody around that would really listen or make me feel like they cared about that. And so it was many years I would be okay for a while, and I'd relapse again. I'd have a job, I'd be successful. I was a manager at different automotive shops. I was selling cars. I was doing great on the outside, but on the inside I was hurting a lot, and it would eventually affect my work and performance, and it was really hard to keep success. People say, oh man, you've done all these great things in your life, but I never really stuck to it. I've never really fully committed to accomplishing a lot of these goals that I set out for, because eventually I would relapse again. I wasn't able to control my thoughts. I wasn't able to be at peace with who I was and forgive myself for a lot of the things that I did do in my youth, and of course forgive others, which is really important. So I continued doing my best to live my life and carry on and kind of hide all these scars that I had and all these feelings that I would carry. And then in 2014, I was now living out in Alberta. And by this point, I had attempted suicide more times than I can count on my hands. And I truly felt that I was not going to be around past the age of 30. I truly felt that in my heart. It's something I believed. And I lived my life accordingly. I lived my life that way, that I wasn't going to be around to deal with all these problems that I have at the moment. And in 2014, there was a string of events that would build up to me wanting to end my life. And I attempted suicide, and I'm extremely lucky to be here today from that attempt. It required surgery, and it took me a very long time to recover from that. I did. I was able to go back to work again. I was able to find success again. I was able to make friends, and I seemed on the outside that I was a happy guy, but I wasn't. When no one else was around, I was crying. I was really hurt, and I still wasn't dealing with the pain that I had inside of me because I still hadn't fully understood why. I still hadn't known what was wrong with me. Nobody ever explained that to me again. So in 2014, I had a lot of friends help me out. I left Alberta. It's not a podcast, but I stole a van from my employer at the time, and they're okay with it now, but I did steal the van, and I drove. Again, I wasn't worried about consequences so much at that time, but out of necessity, I had to do certain things. And I took the van from my employer, and I drove back to Ontario and slept on my friend's couch for a couple of months as I recovered. And then eventually, I was able to get on my feet again. I got a dog named Fox, and I can say this to this day, that dog has saved my life. But she gave me a lot of purpose. She gave me a reason to get up in the morning. She gave me a reason to go for walks. I had to go for walks. I had to get outside. It gave me, I come home from work and she was there to see me. It gave me purpose. It gave me, something did love me. No matter what happens to me, there's going to be a little creature here that misses me and cares about me. So it really helped me a lot to get back on my feet again and want to take on the world. I felt like I overcome another attempt, and I was just ready to keep moving forward with my life. So I ended up back in Alberta. A friend had an opportunity for me. I was stuck in a vicious cycle. This happened already many times in my life. I would have an episode. Depression could lead to multiple suicide attempts, and then I'd be okay for a little while. And of course, life comes in waves. There's going to be moments in your life that are great, and there's going to be moments in your life that are really bad. I was in that great phase. Everything was great. I had great opportunities. I had a great job. But then life is going to start hitting you. And I started to rely on my vices once again. I started to drink heavily and indulge in drugs. I was taking some harder drugs, not just cannabis. I was taking some heavier drugs at that time. And I was at work one day, and I got the news that my mother's body was found. My mother died alone. Suicide is very rampant in my family, and so nobody's ever told me, but I know in my heart how my mother passed away. I know based on messages that I received from her that she chose to end her life early. And it hurt me a lot because earlier in my story I was talking about how much anger I had towards her, and I never really forgave her for that. I never really forgave her for that. So my mother, in her darkest hour, was maybe thinking about, her son still angry at her. And that really affected me a lot after her death. I really struggled with not doing the right thing when I could have or should have, I suppose. And it eventually led to my own relapse again, wanting to end my own life. And this one was pretty serious. I'm extremely lucky that people saw me in the middle of my attempt. And I was brought to, I was admitted at that time as a formal mental health patient. This would be my second time in a mental health facility. And this time it was a little different, because the first time in 2014, my attempt in 2014, I didn't necessarily take it that serious, and I felt like maybe it's because I wasn't taking it that serious that the doctors weren't also. This guy doesn't want help. But that second time I went in there, is oddly enough, I had the same doctor as that time in 2014. And he really took me under his wing. He really wanted to help me. I really felt the empathy from him, going above and beyond the regular group sessions we do and the one-on-ones. He would make extra time to help me understand. And I'll never forget the day that I was told, you have borderline personality disorder. I'll never forget that. I was like, always wondering what was wrong with me. Like, why am I so different? Why can't I function like my friends do? Why is it that I want to isolate all the time? Why is it that I place people up on pedestals when they do absolutely nothing for me? Why? That's weird. Like, why am I so weird? Until it was a day I was told, you have borderline personality disorder. It gave me something to fight. I knew what I could fight. I now knew who my enemy was. I don't want to say I'm my own enemy, but at the end of the day, you are your own enemy with your thoughts. And so it was a very powerful, I cried for probably 2 hours. I just sat there crying because I finally knew who I was, or who to fight to become who I want to be. And a lot of things stuck with me in that 2 weeks that I was at that medical facility. And the thing that stuck with me the most was TBE, they call it, thoughts, behaviors, emotions. They're all connected. Your emotions is how you feel. You cannot change how you feel. That's how you feel. That's your insides. That could be really due to childhood trauma. It could be due to an environment right now. It could be due to many factors, but it's how you feel. Nobody could ever tell you how to feel, and nobody could ever take that away from you. It's yours. Your thoughts can change, but they take a lot of practice to change. People go to school for many, many years to learn how to change their thoughts on a fly. When you're sitting at home and you're depressed and you're sad and having self-doubt and having these thoughts of harming yourself or others, it's extremely hard to change how you feel because you're stuck in these thoughts. Having those type of thoughts affects your behavior, right? Maybe you'll act on those thoughts. Maybe you'll just entertain your vices. You'll do other bad behaviors, right? When you change your behavior, it changes your thoughts. When you do something you enjoy or change your behavior, it changes your thoughts. It allows you to stop focusing on how you're feeling, and it forces you to start focusing on what you're doing. By changing your thoughts, you begin to feel better. And over time, it's not an instant thing. It takes a bit of time, and sometimes you have to do a few different things to get to that point where you're feeling better. And that was the lesson that the doctor taught me. I wish I could remember his name, but for the life of me, I cannot. He was a really an amazing doctor. It was the first time in my life I had a great doctor, and I've experienced many different doctors in many different scenarios. And I do feel like we'll speak on this more, but there's an issue with the medical system. I feel like there's something missing here. But he was the first one that actually made me feel like I could be okay. Like I could really get over this. And so I took his tools, I took that information, and I kind of ran with it. What stuck with me was setting a goal. What do I want to do with my life? What do I really want to do? And it can't be something silly like, I shouldn't say silly, because for some people that's their goal, that's a real goal. But for me, it would have been, but like, be a great car salesman. It couldn't have been something like that. That should be a byproduct of me trying to reach what I really want to do with my life. And for me, at that time, it was to race cars again. I wanted to be a race car driver. Growing up in Cornwall, Ontario, there's a racetrack there, and that's where I spent a lot of my youth. And I wanted to be like those guys. Those guys seemed like my heroes. So I wanted to be a race car driver. So I set that goal. And I had a friend who was very helpful in helping me reach that goal. He believed in me. He believed in my vision. And he helped me achieve it. I became, in less than 1 year, so I got out of, it was a Peter Lougheed Hospital in Calgary. It was July. I got out. And May of that following year, so May 2017, so it was 2016 I went in after my mother died. And then by May 2017, I had a full-blown race car. It was an IMCA modified, highly modified stock car. It was a professional series race car. I had no business driving the thing, but I got one now. And part of the deal with my friend, because he helped me fund this project and this idea and this dream that I had, was that I would put his company's name on the car and I would bring it to different car shows, because I ain't going to win races and get his name, on the podium. So to help his business out for investing in me and my dream was to bring it to different events and car shows and that sort of thing. So the first event we went to was in a small town called Didsbury, Alberta, and that's the same town in 2016 when I had another, when I relapsed my last attempt. It was in that town. It's a very small town. So it was kind of, I don't know the right word, but less than 1 year ago I was in a position where I was going to harm myself, and here I am, part of a big show and shine event with a fully blown race car. And my friend said to me, like, "That's pretty cool, man. Like, I remember picking you up last year. You weren't doing too good, and here you are with this race car. That's pretty cool. How'd you do that?" And I started telling him, and the thoughts, behaviors, emotions. When I was feeling bad, I just did something else, did something different, and eventually I was able to put my life together again. I was able to focus, even though I had all these problems. My problems never went away. I still had all these problems. I was just able to focus and deal with them and handle them a lot better. And he thought, he was like, "Oh, that's pretty inspiring, man. Thanks for sharing that story with me. I feel pretty good about myself, I didn't know you were going through some of those things." And then that's what, it kind of inspired me to, hey, maybe I do have a bit of a story here. Maybe I can help people. Maybe I can get involved a little bit. Because suicide was a big part of my life, a big part of my family. I've lost my grandfather, an uncle who I've never met, and my mother. And an endless amount of friends. I can't even tell you the amount of friends that I've had that have left this world early. So I really felt like, I want to do something about that. I want to get involved a little bit there and see what I can do. I don't think I'm going to change the world, but I think my story might be able to help other people. And so I began sharing my story. I reached out to a car club in Didsbury that had an annual suicide awareness cruise, and I just said, I want to talk, and the president of the car club was very humble, and he allowed me the opportunity to talk at one of their pit stops. And it was a very powerful day. It was a very impactful day for me. It was the first time I ever told my story. It was the first time I ever spoke in front of a group of people and told them that I've wanted to harm myself, that I was abused as a child, that I've been through all these different things. And at the end of it, everybody was coming up to me telling me how much it helped them. And the tools that I gave them, they felt that it was going to help them in certain situations when they're feeling sad and depressed or whatever the case may be. It's very simple stuff, but no one's ever really explained that to them in that way. And so that's when I began SAM, the Suicide Awareness Movement. It was a conversation I was having with the then president of the Didsbury Car Club. We were on the phone one day talking about how great this was, all these people that were, really inspired and encouraged by what we were doing. And he said, well, it's like a movement. And that's where the name Suicide Awareness Movement comes from. It's to instill change. It's a group of people working together for change. And so I began continuing with Sam, telling my story, speaking at different various events, doing what I could to get involved and try to raise awareness on certain topics and help change the stigma. That grew and was getting very, very big and almost too fast, but it got a lot of attention, eventually leading to me being on CTV News. That was actually a great experience, but it was an extremely hard experience. And again, I'm supposed to be the man, and I'm supposed to be able to get in front of that camera and talk and share my story and not be nervous about it, or not be scared about it, and not have doubts about myself and feel like I can't do it. But the whole time I was doing it, it was the worst thing I was going through. And I really felt like the room of people who were listening to me share my story didn't know how to deal with my anxiety or understand what anxiety was and what it looked like. And I really wanted to teach them. I felt like an opportunity where I can, like, this is what anxiety is. You know, it's not what you read about. It's you know, it's the sweaty hands, it's the pacing, it's the rambling on when you're talking, like I probably was in the beginning of this here. Now, but it was a great opportunity with the CTV News. But then what happened was it grew too big too fast. I had a lot of pressure. I had people messaging me, seeking help, seeking for my guidance, and I didn't have a proper support system or anything in place to take care of my own mental health. So although I had overcome a lot, I wasn't necessarily taking care of my mental health because I was so focused on helping others. I couldn't handle that pressure. I gave it all up. I had an opportunity to race in the NASCAR Pinty Series, and I walked away from it because I simply couldn't handle the pressure that I was under. And it was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever been through was I had all these plans and I was going to do all these great things, and then I couldn't do it. I couldn't reach it. I felt very low about myself and who I was. So I gave it all up. I sold the race car, and that was that. I don't want to do that no more. But I want to help people, and that's when I really thought about how could I help people? What could I do to really make a difference? And I did start doing research, and you know, you kind of know about it, but that's when I really found out that the suicide rate in Canada and almost the world is the highest in the Inuit communities. So I wanted to go there. SAM is a thing that I do. It's not a job. It doesn't pay bills or anything like that. So I needed to have a job. So I looked for work in the north. How can I live and work in northern Canada so I can live in one of these communities and do what I do best, which is get involved with mental health. And so I found an opportunity to work for a company. I will not say their name, just for legality reasons. Yeah. But I took an opportunity with them, and I ended up in a small community called Inukjuak, Nunavik. Beautiful community, maybe 2,000 people, I think, maybe a little less than that. It was one of the most humbling experiences I ever had in my life. There's a lot of great things that happen in the north. It's beautiful, the culture is beautiful, the people are beautiful, the language is beautiful, but there's also a lot of pain there. And I fully immersed myself in it. In a short period of time, I became a member of their suicide prevention committee after one of our employees for the store that I work for, one of our employees committed suicide. And so it really affected all of us as employees, but also the community, right? She was 15 years old. And that is when I went and spoke at the church, went and spoke at the school, and I started getting involved. I was on the suicide prevention committee, and I started to really take my time and learn about why is the suicide rate so high here? Why is there so much addiction and, mental illness complications? And so that was great. I was heavily involved. I started making a life for myself. in the north, and that's what I wanted. I was really committed to doing that. And then I, as many men do, they want to grow their family, if you will. And so I started dating a young lady, and she eventually got pregnant. And through her own traumas and her own experiences and her own understanding, it became very difficult for us to have a healthy relationship and be together. And she no longer wanted me there. She did cause a lot of problems with my employer. And they wanted to move me to another community to get away from that. They had offered to move me to a community called Kuujjuaq. And at first I was like, no, like, don't move me. I'm having a son. Like, what are you talking about? I'm having a son here. Don't move me away from my son. But if you're going to move me away from my son, don't move me to that community because it sells alcohol. And I'm a recovering addict. And I can't be in that type of environment. There's isolation. There's no resources. There's very few things to do other than that. So I was given 10 days notice and told I'm moving to Kuujjuaq. And so it was very stressful time for me. It was very hard for me to do that. But I did because I didn't want to leave the north. I wanted to stick around and try to be involved in my son's life any way possible. So I went to Kuujjuaq, and I think within the first week I relapsed. I was drunk, and I was drinking again. And I'm lucky my boss, my manager, was kind of okay with me. I think she knew the bit of partying going on at the house, late nights, and lots of noise, and I think she kind of knew what was going on, but it didn't really put any pressure on me. She was very understanding. I think she understood I was going through a lot. And then I was obviously really upset with my employer and with my son's mother for doing all these things that got me removed from a community. But I understood it. I understood where it came from on her end. I understood where it all stemmed from, right? There's a lot of trauma in the north, and there's a lot of trauma in the environments she lives in, and so I had to be understanding of that and take my time to reflect and see what I can do about it, because that was the reason why I went to the north, was to understand it, and now I have an opportunity to really understand what's going on and try to do the right thing versus what most people would have done. So I stuck around. I'd get a nasty email, and I'd send money, right? So I tried to do the right thing by her, even though it hurt me so much and I was so angry. I just tried to do the right thing. Eventually, I was able to meet my son, and it was the best day of my life. He stayed with me for 3 days, which was a big deal for her to, after everything we've been through. For her to have dropped him off with me for 3 days was an absolutely amazing thing. I was really proud of her for doing that, because I know she had a lot of people telling her not to do it, but she did. And so I got to meet my son. We had 3 beautiful days together. And then they went back to the Inukjuak. And then on August 16th, my son passed away. I don't want to get into too many details of that, but my son passed away, and that was extremely hard for me to deal with. I did not think I was going to get through that. It was extremely hard for me because I was alone. I didn't have family. I didn't have real friends there, and it was a different language and a different culture. But I did get through it, and I after we buried our son, I went back to the community of Kuujjuaq, and I knew I knew this community was dangerous for me because I'm recovering alcoholic, and there's booze everywhere here, and that's what I'm probably going to go do. But I was having thoughts of harming myself. I didn't want to live anymore, so I walked to the emergency room in Kuujjuaq. They have a small little hospital there, so I walked there, and I went in and I told the doctor, like, you know, I'm gonna hurt myself today. Like, my son died. I'm thinking about harming myself. I need help. And she says to me, oh, you must be not sleeping very much. And I was like, no, not really at all. And she handed me some sleeping pills, which is like the worst thing you can hand someone who is depressed and thinking about harming themselves. So I felt like I was in immediate danger. I had to get out of there right now. And so thankfully, again, I had some help. I was able to get in an airplane, and I came to Ottawa. And I stayed with my brother's wife for a while. He was in the Navy. He's out now, but he was in the Navy, so he wasn't even there. And I hadn't even spoken to my brother really in 8 years. I hadn't seen him in 8 years. But when my son died, he was there for me. And so that really taught me kind of like what family is all about, you know? It's like no matter what you go through, family, at the end of the day, your family is there for you, and that meant a lot to me. But the last year has been a real struggle for me, because I did all these great things with my life and inspired all kinds of people and had all these great opportunities, but now here I am, again, depressed and not really functioning the way I could be, or people expect me to be, or the way I want to be. I struggle a lot with the loss of my son. I spent a lot of time doing opposite of what I was taught and what turned my life around. And so I spent a lot of time just in my room, depressed, not doing too well. And then eventually I was offered to go to a rehab facility, and I went. I agreed to go, and I went. It was supposed to be a 57-day program, and it was I stayed for 8 before I walked out of the place. It was not the right fit for me. There was a few things that happened that I felt my son's death was just disregarded and just disrespected. So I left the facility. Now, my brother just went on a limb 6 months prior and said, my Derek needs help, speaking to his now wife. Give him a place to stay. We'll help him out and help him get back on his feet again. And I started going down the wrong path. That's when this idea of rehab came up. They're kind of suggesting I really go to this. And so I accepted it and I went. And now I left early. And so I felt like I let everybody in the world down. So thankfully, I had a friend who was able to help me and put me in a safe place. He tracked the train I was on, and then he it's our buddy Ray that you know actually. He tracked the train that I was on, and he picked me up at the train station, and then he set me up in a place where it's right on the water, where I can be at peace with myself and really find myself again. So the last year I've spent pretty depressed, pretty sad, pretty alone, not really knowing what to do with my life now, because I had this other life. I had a son. I had all these things set up. I was going to be involved with these communities. I was going to share my story, and I was going to help all these people. And now here I am in Ottawa without any goals or any real plan for the future. And I'd done all this work on Sam before. I had set up all these things with Sam, and I found it very encouraging, you know, for me when I told my story and speak. So that's when I decided, you know, I'm going to really commit to this mental health awareness and suicide prevention and really put all of my efforts into it, because that's really what I want to do. Is I really want to help people understand that they're not alone with what they're going through, and that it does get better over time. Like, it's not going to, it's not going to change overnight, but it is going to get better, and I really promise you that it does. As hard as it, whatever you're going through right now, it can get easier. But I've really struggled with that over the last years, is understanding that's a message I deliver, and I'm not, what is that, practice what you preach, right? And I wasn't doing any of that. So by me sharing my story and continuing to share my story, it allows me to get these thoughts off of my chest, get these emotions off of my chest, and it allows me to really understand that it's okay that I'm feeling this way. It's okay what I've been through, and it's okay to be sad and cry. But I still need to move forward with my life. I still need to find a way to be happy and find success, and that's why I appreciate you guys doing this type of work, because it gives me a lot of courage to keep going, because I'm not alone. There's 3 other gentlemen and some other people in this room here that care about this stuff, and I think it's important that we continue these types of conversations. I don't really know what else to say. Normally, when I do these talks, there's like 100 people, and I go up on a stage and I just like put on a show almost, right? So this is a little different for me to sit here and kind of say my story. There's a bunch of points I didn't even. Now that, like, in reflection, I kind of buzzed over, but I hope we can have further conversations.
That was fantastic. I was deeply moved by your story, and thank you, man. Thank you for having the courage to show up here today. This all happened really last minute. Like, I just found out about your story a couple of days ago, and it's been bothering me the last couple of days, because I wanted to really showcase a really touching real life story, and I'm not discounting the stories that we have, but I magically found out about you a couple of days ago, and going through your story and finding out everything that you've been through, and there's a lot that you've been through. There's many chapters from what you've outlined, and each chapter is almost as devastating as the last. And there's a reason I think you're here now in Ottawa, and I think you have brothers in this room here with you now. So I just want to thank you again for joining us. And
thanks.
And sharing your story, man. And I want to just pass it over to John, because I know you've been very vocal and public about your brother's loss, also who took his own life. So I was just curious, like, what came up for you as you were listening to Derek's story, and how you can reflect that to your experience with the loss of your brother.
Well, they're very different in the sense of, obviously you lost a son, and that's a trauma that I don't understand. I understand death, and I understand suicide, so I can relate on that level, but I can't relate to your actual pain, or at least the exact experience of it. In relation to my brother, grew up in a very dysfunctional world, obviously very troubled young man. This is a long time ago. My brother died 35 years ago, so it's very distant. I don't have that same visceral effect that you have presently. You're still living it, fortunately you're still here, and clearly that you have a voice, and that's needed in a men's community. So you're welcomed. Hopefully you can continue to work on yourself. Ultimately, it does fall on your shoulders, in the sense of you need to heal, and nobody can do that for you. We can be there to help, but ultimately you have to do it yourself, and that's what you're in the process of. So I hope that you continue with that. I've been fortunate in the sense that I think we've all had times where we felt like, why am I here? Why should I continue with this? It's just too painful. Some of us take it one step further. I've been fortunate that I've never taken it past maybe the odd thought, a couple stupid moments in my life, but never attempted any of that. So, these are difficult topics. I'm glad that as men we can share them. I'm actually so thankful that I run into you guys. You know, you're a lot younger than I am, and I think maybe that's a little bit of it too. I think from a generational perspective, I think we're starting to see at least a little more movement among men in the ability to talk. Like back in my day, you couldn't talk like that. And I think back to my brother, you know, I see a lot of things that with him, there's no way he would have been able to share this with the community that he was in. You know, it was suck it up, buttercup. You know, we talk about the language that is used.
Big boys don't cry.
Big boys don't cry. And if you do, you're ostracized, you're, shamed, all that kind of stuff, because you're not supposed to do that. And yet, it's kind of funny growing up around all these people who would negate or at least not acknowledge my pain or that kind of stuff. I'd look at them and they were hurting young boys also, even if they were men. You could see that they had their own trauma. And then they were just continuing a pattern. And so I think this forum is a way to begin or at least continue what's being done. So there are more and more people who are starting to talk, more and more men who are starting to talk. And so I'm very thankful that you came out and shared your story. I know very difficult for you. And it doesn't necessarily get easier, but time does ease it. It's not as intense. And so you just got to keep doing what you're doing. And so.
Thanks, John. Lee, what were your reflections based on Derek's story?
First of all, Derek, you're loved. Second of all, I'm genuinely sorry for all of your losses. So I'm listening to Derek's story, and one of the items that stuck out to me was the connection between purpose or a lack of purpose and manhood. Okay, without going back through details, we're just going to use the example of Derek's dog named Fox. When you have a reason, when you have a purpose, it kind of solves some of the mystery of being a man, right? If I'm a carpenter, and that's what I do every day, I don't have to assume what my purpose is going to be for 8 hours. But the remaining 16 hours, whether I'm a father, whether I'm a person that plays on a hockey team, whether I don't have any other hobbies except to sit down and maybe just play a couple video games or watch some TV, it is in those spaces that are in the absence of purpose that we find ourselves, looking for ourselves. What are we doing here? Okay. And so I'm just going to hold on to that for a second. But I want to ask John a question because I was waiting for that answer. Your brother's been gone for 35 years. You say it gets better across time. But in that initial period, as you were growing up into your manhood that you are now, how did you absorb that pain? How did you deal with the loss? How did you not replace, but how did you live with an absence? These are the things that I'm trying to pull out of these two moments.
Well, I think for myself, my experience, my brother and I were not close, other than, I know Derek was mentioning his abuse that he grew up with. My abuse wasn't the same abuse that he had, but I grew up around violence. And that was the staple of my existence. And my violence teacher was my brother. So we were never close. So it wasn't like I had this kumbaya relationship with my brother. In a lot of ways, I'm going to say I hated him. And yet, it's familial, so you're supposed to love. It's difficult to love somebody and hate them in the same breath. Yet we tend to do that, don't we?
Absolutely.
So my experience of his death wasn't, I can't say it wasn't traumatic, because of course it was traumatic. I can still remember the night that my brother passed, or at least when I heard that he had overdosed. So my brother had mental health issues, ended up swallowing a bunch of pills, and Obviously, then it was taken to the hospital. They got him there quickly, and unfortunately, at the time, they did a couple of mistakes. The hospital, it was here in Ottawa, Riverside. They didn't pump his stomach right away. They tried to induce vomiting, and they gave him a drug that ended up being contraindicated to the medication he took. So rather than helping him, they were now fighting two battles, the drugs that he took and then obviously the reaction from the other drug. And there was a period when my mother was in the room with him and he was lucid. He was talking and he basically said he didn't want to die. But enough drugs got into his system and stopped his heart. And unfortunately, at that time he passed, 25 years old. I've seen the way we treat mental health patients. And I've seen the life that the vast majority of people with mental health, especially if you have severe mental health, how we're treated in our society. We're not good with mental health. If you got cancer, everybody's around you to support you in the whole bit. If you're schizophrenic or any other kind of severe mental health issue, you're a pariah. People don't want to be around you. So I feel for my brother in some ways, maybe he had an easier time of it because of that.
If I may ask, so your brother was your primary male example.
Yes.
And so he's not here. What gifts or what challenges did he leave you with? And how do you grow with those things that are left behind?
Well, that's a whole can of worms in of itself. So obviously I learned violence from an early age. I was also a very small kid. At age of 16, I was, I think, 90 pounds. When you're in high school, you're 90 pound, everybody wants to pick on you and beat you up. And violence became a tool for me. And it was a very successful tool. It helped keep at bay the bullies. Unfortunately, down the road, you end up being the bully. And you start using it for all the wrong reasons. They were right at the time. They protected you. But so learning about my manhood, I'm still learning that. And that's the challenging part. I'm being around more men, but I've never had a male really, formulate ideas and direct me. Though I did go through a period when I went for massage school, I ran into a gentleman who ended up being a mentor for several years. And that benefited me a lot. At least it showed me a positive example of how men can be. But I'm still working that. And I think that's an ongoing, lifelong process. And hopefully I'm getting better at it, one day at a time, as they say.
Yeah, no, it definitely sounds like you are. And I wanted to reflect on something that Lee mentioned about purpose. And I thought that was really deep, and reflecting back on your story, Derek, as well, about that. And certainly with Sam, and all the great work that you're doing with Sam, there's obviously a lot of purpose there, right? But in understanding your story and everything that you've gone through so far, of course, and everything you're still going through now, as you've outlined, it must be extremely difficult for you to be able to hold space for a lot of these men. I know off the air before we started recording, you were talking about some of the stories about some of the men and people who have reached out to you, and there was a lot of added pressure. I wouldn't say unnecessary pressure, but this is added pressure, right? Like now you have a story that's out there, and bravely, courageously, you put it out there in the universe. Of course, it's going to attract back likeness, right, of other people having that same story back. So, you're obviously still out there. You're still a public figure. You're sharing your story now, and when this gets out there, you'll likely attract even more attention. So, my question right now is what are you doing to take care of yourself right now? What are the things that are helping someone who's gone through your situation, or families of people who are going through or have gone through your situation? What is helping now?
My dog. I still have Fox. At the end of the day, that little bugger keeps me going, man. She gets me up in the mornings, right? And it pushes me. Now, I'm extremely thankful for my living situation. There's a gentleman who's helping me out a lot right now. He lets me live in his basement as long as I rake the leaves and eventually shovel the snow, right? And it's right on the water. It's a very beautiful environment. So I've been able to control my thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. I've been able to manage them all day long, every day. Not saying that they don't go to a dark and bad place, but I'm able to catch it and do my best to manage through it. So I'm consistently changing what I'm doing. I'm outside playing in the garden. I'm walking my dog, playing with my dog. I got a little practice pad with the drumsticks. I'll pick those up for 5 minutes. I'm constantly doing things that I find pleasure in. Mm-hmm. And because if I don't, when I stop, I think about my son. I think about all the negative things. I think about how angry I am and all the things I want to do to hurt myself or someone else. So I just do my best to stay busy. Now, that could be very hard when you're feeling sad. What are you going to do when you're feeling sad? When you're feeling sad and depressed, the last thing you want to do is something you normally like to do. It's because you want to be sad and depressed right now. I found a trick that is to write it down. Write down the things you like to do. Write them all down. As silly and like elementary school as it seems, a lot of these mental health tips and tricks, and it seem very silly because you're doing it the first time. The first time is silly. The second time you're like, oh, that helped me. I'm going to do that again because it helped you. But the first time is always silly. But just do it. Trust me. Write down the 10 things that you like to do the most. Doesn't have to be big. Could be anything. Reading, writing, walking, drumming, whatever. Write it down. You're going to catch yourself feeling sad. Something's going to happen in life. You're going to be sad. You're going to catch yourself in that with those thoughts. You got to be aware of your thoughts, but you'll catch them. Oh, I'm feeling sad. I don't want to live. I'm angry about this. I'm angry about that. Whatever the case is, I want to drink. I want to do this or that. It's very hard to think about what do I normally like doing. Grab that list and just start doing those things. Go through the list one by one if you have to, and just start doing those things. And over time, could be 10 minutes, could be an hour, could be 5 minutes. Boom, you'll feel better. It's like magic. It's weird, but it works. So that's how, to get back to your question, forgive me, I'm rambling on again. That's how I've been able to cope lately, is just constantly managing my thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. If there's a situation I'm in and it's causing me something negative, I leave. I'm getting out of here.
Well, I think it's, and this is something we all could probably learn, and we could probably relate it to sports and all of that. Like, you learn new skills. So if you're going to take up a new activity and try to get good at it, you have to learn the skills.
Yeah, basics. The
basics. And our mental health, in a lot of ways, that's exactly what it is. And what's going to be in our toolkit. Eventually down the road, we need to have larger toolkits to deal with more severe situations, the basic stuff, obviously. But it's skill set, and I think if we all talk together, that's part of the development of it.
Of course. And I love how practical your answer was, right? You weren't rambling at all, by the way.
Okay. I feel like
dropping knowledge.
Not at all. You were just like, it was very straight to the point, right? From the thoughts, behaviors, and emotions onwards to actual, journaling, going through and really just not even doing the things that you're really good, that you like to do. I think it's also important for mental health to do things that you're good at, like as you were mentioning about sports and skills, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's important to cultivate some sort of an activity that makes you feel good about yourself, right? That makes you feel like you're doing something great. As well, if I was to add to that, like an activity of creativity, I think really reaches within ourselves, because I think creativity is really our gift to the world, right? And creativity doesn't necessarily need to be art or music, as some of us do. It could even just be you sharing your story the way that you shared it, the choice of the words that you had, the order that you chose to share your story within. To me, that's all creative energy, and to me, that's your gift to the world, right? And I wanted to thank you for those gifts today. So I just want to move on to the next question, if I may. This question is going to be more so about men's mental health. I know Sam is suicide awareness in general, with men and with women, but we can't ignore the fact that the majority of suicides in Canada and possibly around the world is committed majority by men. In Canada, the statistics show up to 75% of those who choose to take their own life are men. So I have a couple of things in here and that I wanted to bring forward so that you guys can talk about it and think about it. And a lot of these things were outlined in your story, and they are the risk factors that are identified by the Center for Suicide Prevention. And some of these, and almost all of these actually were like ringing off as I was listening to your story. So I wanted to reflect on how you felt about these risk factors and how the average person can identify these risk factors in their friends or family, or even sometimes even within themselves. And doing what I was talking about earlier, and intervening before someone gets hurt, whether it's themselves or somebody else. So the risk factors that were listed here were, number one, reluctance to seek help, right? Number two was hypermasculinity, including the suck it up attitude, which is, you know, the attitude that unfortunately a lot of us grew up in, whether it's our generation or the generations before us, like the generation you grew up in. I know with the generation that I grew up in, that was certainly the fact. And I'm starting to see encouragingly that future generations, or, you know, us stepping forward to usher in that future generation, we're choosing a different path. The path has not changed yet. It's still very much prevalent. Reluctancy to show emotion is another one too. Stoicism, which has always been, you know, celebrated in society as a positive male trait in a lot of movies. Social isolation, right? With Kuujjuaq was the place, right? You didn't want it to get everyone. Was it Kuujjuaq? Yeah. And you recognized right away.
I knew before I took the job. I did. They offered me, oh, you're going to go to this community. Mm-hmm. I did research on it first, so I knew which ones were dry, which ones were semi-dry, which ones were.
And alone too, right? Like the one that you'd be actually isolated and with nothing else to do other than to drink, right? And
essentially, like there's no resources there. There's stores and that's about it.
Yeah.
Like unless I was like a local and I was involved in hunting and fishing and that sort of thing. And over time, I for sure people would have taken me on their arm and you know taught me that culture and that lifestyle.
But it takes time.
Because they don't trust me. Right? I'm just another. I don't want this is I'm just another white guy there, right? And I don't care about them and oh, sorry. I keep playing with the microphone here. They didn't care. I don't care. I'm just another one of these guys from the South that's going to come here and get paid a bunch of money and then leave, right? So it takes time to build that trust, and you really got to care and
patience as well, right? Yeah, and to put that energy out there to be accepted, even.
Yeah,
right?
and understanding. Yeah. Understanding, you know, there's a lot of mental illness, a lot of trauma. There's a lot of hurt and pain and suffering, and you have to be extremely understanding of what they're going through, because it's nothing close to what we have gone through here. No. Even though, and think about how hurt we are as people, and imagine it's like 10 times worse up there, you know.
It's so true. It's definitely a lot to think about, right? And it puts a lot of things in perspective about this is within our same country, but just completely different reality.
Mm-hmm. Well, it points out the necessity for community. And ultimately, isn't that what a lot of men ignore? So, like, if you think about it, you put yourself in a community that you weren't part of. Mm-hmm. So that in itself is something to look at, you know, and we should all be looking at that. Why do we isolate ourselves, like you were just mentioning, right?
Exactly. And the other risk factors on here were aggression and impulsiveness, which, you know, a lot of shades from your story and your upbringing, John.
Very much so. Yeah.
Risk taking, which I think in your story, you really made that clear to me. When I originally read this list, I was trying to put the pieces together as to how does risk-taking fit within this risk factor. But as you mentioned it, like if you're not seeing your life past the age of 30, then what are you living for, right? Yeah. You might as well just, you know, go balls to the wall, just recklessness.
To make a little bit of a joke, you said you weren't really a good driver and you took up race car driving, right?
Yeah, very risky profession for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, right?
Yeah, it must have been the adrenaline. What did you love about race car driving?
Being able to go to that place where because I was absolutely terrified, right? Like I was absolutely, my knees would be shaking, and being able to overcome that fear takes it's a mental place you have to go to where you do not give not F about anything, right? Like so, it's a confidence building thing. It built confidence up. It just gave me a lot of. Really, I was able to go work on the race car. I was able to stay busy with it. But it's that King Kong on cocaine feeling when you overcome that fear, that initial fear of my foot wants to go down, but my brain is saying no, don't do that. It's exhilarating, and you feel alive, right?
Mm-hmm. Building that confidence, I think, of fear, and I find that a lot of elements in my own life too is that when you continue to push your boundaries out there, is the level of growth that comes with that, and facing your fears. So that was.
To be fair too, though, like if we're talking about men's health and all that, me becoming a race car driver was a little bit narcissistic, right? It's a
what way?
narcissistic trait. By me, some clout. Some people say, "Oh, you're looking for clout," or it was a little bit like once I got the race car, there was a bit of narcissism in there. Now most directors and most executives in this world have narcissistic traits, and that's maybe how I was able to get to the level that I got with that. But there was a bit of narcissism in there, is that I can be whatever I want. I can go be a race car driver if I want to, and it's actually borderline dangerous as well, because it could, if you're not thinking or focusing on the right thing, it could go negatively, right? But that is a part of me wanted to be a race car driver to make that narcissism inside of me happy, so I'm a race car driver.
Well, I'd say that's more like you're looking for value. So when you've been devalued by yourself or even the people around you, you're going to try to find an activity that gives you value.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure that's a narcissistic trait. I think that's more of a confidence and insecurity that you're looking to
that's
feed.
something that a lot of men are just not used to feeling sometimes, right?
Of
Feeling
course.
that we can
Yeah.
be unlimited and that we can really do anything that we want to do, because I truly believe you can. You've already overcome so much. You're here still for a reason. I feel the same about every man in this room right now, and a lot of people actually. I really firmly believe that we are our worst enemies sometimes, right? Especially as men.
Oh, without a doubt.
And there's so much that we could really do if we really just told ourselves that we or even give permission to ourselves to try things and to do it. So I wouldn't consider that, like, maybe I would agree with John, I wouldn't consider that narcissistic. I would consider that extremely brave, taking a chance on yourself at that vulnerable time in your life to become something that people strive to become and that people look up to. You got to a level, you deserve the praise, man. You get to that level, man, you deserve to be on TSN. You deserve to be on CTV, man. It's okay, man. It's okay.
I appreciate that.
I
I do appreciate that, because I obviously I said it, so I thought that was going in my head, so I said it out loud, right? So I appreciate that, gentlemen. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're
for sure,
welcome.
man. You're destined. You've already done great things, man, and you're just destined for greater things. That's why you're still here.
Thank you.
Right, so, and just to finish off that list, it's after risk taking, it was frequent alcohol or drug use,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That disrupts everyday function, and that's what pushes these things into like an addict territory, and then previous suicide attempts as well, right? Likely, if you've tried in the past, then it's a lot really to overcome that. So I do want to ask you about that actually. So. But first, I'll open it up to you gentlemen about these risk factors. A lot of them are really umbrellaed under that hyper-masculine kind of umbrella, right? Because like we talk about the aggressiveness, we talk about the risk-taking. When I ask you guys, and it's going to be a very general, very broad, open question, why is it that most of the suicide attempts are for men, and not even just most of the suicide attempts are for men? It's the men are likely to use more lethal force and lethal means in order to achieve suicide. So really just reflect based on, your experiences as a man, as a father, about why is this an epidemic for men?
So I think it's the quote unquote alpha gene. In terms of the violent side of ending one's life in a horrific way, I don't think it's I don't think anybody really wants to die, but why does it look so gruesome? I think we want that last moment to be known that I had this big strength that you weren't paying attention to. I could have gone out quietly, but I did this big dramatic thing. And I'm assuming, because I'm still alive, I can't say how everybody's thinking, but in my mind, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it big. And that bigness is a message. It's a silent, deadly message to the silence that created the situation. I'm going to say in a hypothetical situation, my name is something else, and my partner's name is something else, and my partner's done something to me, and I'm so hurt, and there's no conversation there, and I've decided that I'm going to end my life. Maybe in ending of my life in such a violent, massive way gives that message to my partner and says, hey, this is what you did. I think the bigger it is, the more this message was meant to get out. And I think that's why if there is a death of a suicide nature, that it can tend to be more gruesome, because we want that gruesomeness to live for us. Okay, that's kind of my part of my answer. If you wanted to contribute in a different way, I'm going to go through this in a second.
Okay, it's interesting. I don't quite see it that way. For me, it's a lot more simplistic. If we look in general with men, and we've been discussing this, we have a hard time asking for help, right? When you look, women attempt suicide more often than men, and yet they're not dying as frequently as men. Well, men aren't asking for help, right? Because maybe they can ask for help. So women, clearly, it looks to me like they're asking for help.
Okay.
Because they're not dying.
Okay.
If you're dying, you're not asking for help. You're done. So I think that's part of what it is men don't have the ability to ask for help. And maybe that's why they take more lethal means, because they just get to a point where
Beyond frustration?
beyond anything that they can't ask, can you help me in this moment? And nobody's going to help me. So I'm going to end it. And at least that's what it looks like to me. That,
if I may, also one of the things that you wanted to kind of look at is like, what's the reluctance to seek help? Do you remember holding the flashlight? Does anybody else remember holding the flashlight for their father and what that was like? We're all going to chuckle in the room for a second. If you
PTSD right
Oh
now.
yeah, absolutely. You're not holding it in the right place, and that could just lead to a whole bunch of arguments. And so the reluctance to seek help comes from the examples of how other people sought help. My dad was he could fix anything. He could fix anything. He wasn't asking for help. I don't know, not that I don't know what a positive male community looks like. By that I mean it's not like I move into a house and like 10 guys show up with boxes saying, hey, welcome to the neighborhood. There isn't this continued practice of men community. We're working on it as we speak. I know it exists in history. I know there's ways of us doing it. We're not idiots. But what I'm saying is the reluctance is there because maybe we haven't had the experience of when we've asked a question receiving an answer, or maybe we've asked a question and the patience wasn't given. Now, if I know on a habitual level that I've gone to a teacher, I've gone to a principal, I've gone to my boss, has anybody asked for a raise? Who are most of our bosses? Male figures, per se, quote unquote. Have we tried to change things in society? Who are the gatekeepers? We have this kind of precedence or element that exists in our culture that says if you're going to make a request, chances are it's going to be declined. You're going to have to work a little bit harder. And so I go to work. I'm a father. I don't play hockey. I don't want to keep saying hockey, but I'm on a hockey team. I got to do groceries. I got to cut the lawn. I'm taking Fox out for a couple walks in the day, and I need help. Where's the space for me to do it? Now in my mind, I'm going to carve out that space. I'm going to go and do that thing. I'm going to go up the mountain. I'm going to go say, hey, John, I've got a question for you. I need help. It took me a lot just to take the thought, take the emotions, form the words, and then take it to the place and space. And like that, you've just discouraged that practice thing. And I know that we can't win all the time. And I know that not everybody's going to say yes. But in our world, when you get that no, we've got to find another way. We've got to find another way. Do you remember that list of stuff that I was doing in my day? How many times do I have to find a way to get this thing? You know what's easier? I'm done. It can either figure itself out, or when I've got time, I'm going to deal with it. That's a part of my reluctance. I don't have all of this time to do all of these things with people that may not do it with me. To be rejected often. If you're in a diverse culture, part of your history is rejection. And so if that's already built into my kind of ethos of living, if I know that my father before me was trying to get a job opportunity, got declined, I'm not saying that I'm limited by what my father can and can't do, but if I know that the rejection exists, why would I go try in the same systems that have already rejected me in the past? That's one. The other thing, too, is have I seen somebody go through the other side and come out the other side and say that the help worked out? I think that's a part of what we have to do as men is go into these services, utilize them, come back out with testimonials and say it works. You ever get a new ice cream shop that shows up on your corner? I've never gone there, but somebody comes out and goes, hey, I tried it. You should go get the vanilla ice cream. Because that's in my head as an invitation, it may take me 10 times, it may take 100 times, but eventually the invitation has been given, I'm more apt to do it because somebody's gone in and come back out and told me it's all right. So I'll just leave it there for the reluctance to seek help. But like
That was great. That was
yeah.
That was great.
That was awesome, man. And if I'm just gonna add a little bit too. I think, and just to reflect on what you guys were talking about, like first you mentioned the alpha gene, which is a very interesting take on why men commit suicide so much. And then John with the reluctance to help, and your amazing reflection on reluctance to help is amazing too. Like my perspective when it comes to why men suffer so much, and just based on my own experiences and my own inner work, looking within myself after my divorce, that flipped my entire world upside down, really, becoming a father for the first time and not knowing how that was going to go, like fucking up basically since day one as soon as that happened, and picking up the pieces from there. It was a lot about my inner dialogue and my inner belief and compass about what a man really is and was. A lot of the times we're misguided. There's a lot of information out there, right? But sometimes we're misguided by either our fathers or a lack of a father in many communities or in many people's personal circumstances. And we're left to kind of figure out what does being a man really mean or look like, right? We're left to things like Hollywood, we're left to the schoolyard, and we're left to other places to really teach us what that really means. And without proper guidance and without proper acceptance from society and from community, we're left to figure it out all alone. And isolation is one of those risk factors that we were talking about. And this is going to segue perfectly, actually, into our next question, because our next question is really about society, and it's about community as well, right? Is it a problem in society or is it a problem in community? And also, I loved what you said about has the help helped, right? Because on one side, we're reluctant to help. On the other side, is the help sufficient? Is it working, right? Has it really saved anybody's life, or is there more that needs to be done, right? In these conversations with men's mental health and with Movember, we're always saying, share your story, reach out for help. It's okay to cry, right? Is it enough though? Is society doing enough? Because do men need to be better at reaching out, or does society need to be better at reaching out to men, right? That's a question that I wanted to pose to you guys. Whoever wants to take that first can take it. And also there's a bigger question at play here, and that's, does society really need to redefine what it needs to be in a man, and what does that really look like? Right? Because now we're talking about things like changing like Hollywood ideals about what a man is, celebrating different traits of what a man is and masculinity. What are those traits that need to be celebrated?
If I can hop in real quick, and then I'm going to get you to ask the question again, just so that everybody can participate in this. But what I'll say, I was outside with Derek, and we were talking about what this kind of conversation today was going to be about, and whimsically, but like necessarily, I said, I think maybe we should just give up on the idea of being men and just accept who we are as individuals. And by that, I mean, look, I'm going to stand up and use the bathroom respectfully. I'm going to be able to produce a child because I possess the anatomy to do so. And therefore, by biological designation, I'm a male, and I'm proud of myself for who I am. But what I'm saying is, we have these wonderful kind of archetypes that have existed across time that we try to attain. This Hercules, this Zeus, this alpha male. And what happens if I don't make it? What happens if I lose? What happens if if we're playing 21, everybody shirts versus skins? What happens if I don't make it on the shirts or the skins team? Am I not allowed to play basketball? I mean, like, how do I remain who I am, not participate in what's going on, and still be welcomed? Or do we have these things that are built in society? You've got to have a car, you've got to have a home, you've got to have a job, a business card, you've got to have a lake house, you got to have, like, what are the things that tell me that I'm equal enough to be a man? Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a stubborn person, I'm going to find it in my own eyes. But where we get rejected in society is what erodes us, and it's what takes us back into those dark places. If I'm getting rejected out there and I'm not feeling good, I'm going to sit down with myself and say, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. But what am I trying to be good enough for? And so if you don't have enough money in the bank, you're not a good enough man. If you don't have a roof over your head, you're not a good enough man. And so I'm going to go really quickly into this situation. I do feel that society creates the environment by which we live. Nature versus nurture. My nature is what's in my event, what's available to me. If all of the cost of living is doing this thing, if my ability to access money is doing all this stuff, if the price of a car, of an apartment, all these things, that's got nothing to do with me as a man. All of those things are societal factors.
Well, you're talking about system change.
Right. That's why I want to slide through this quickly, because this becomes a whole socioeconomic, and we're in North America. That's different than in Haiti. That's different in Ghana. Like, I want to be smart to this conversation and say that here in North America is not the same as in other countries, okay? People are going to suffer differently. But what we talked about earlier was just because you don't feel my pain doesn't make my pain any less important. Okay, so yes, back home, my parents' country, Haiti, different than what's happening here with me in Canada. But what I'm saying is I'm here as a male in this country, and if I don't feel adequate, what are the barriers of access? And if there are barriers, what am I trying to access? Like, what am I trying to do to seem? And for me, it's the picket fence. It's the garage that I can put the car in. It's being able to take my family on a trip once a year to Disneyland, whatever the case is. If I can't do those things, what am I supposed to do? And so this is, I don't know if our standards, I know that they're changing in our generation and time, which is good, but we still have to live through the change. And we're still waiting for things to catch up, but then people are dying because they're not hitting that mark. So I think we just have to change, and I can't change it I can't wake up and hope that the club of men are going to change all the rules. But what I can do is I can look at you when I see you and I can accept you for who you are. I can meet you where you're at. I can see you, I can meet you where you're at. I can see you, I can meet you where you're at. You don't have to cook with the same spices I do, okay? But you do have to flush the toilet when you leave. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain basic respectful things that we can do. We don't have to do all the same things, but I think we're coming past a point where conventional things that have been placed on us, like you have to have these things to be this person, I don't think we can afford those things anymore. We're losing more people by boxing them out. If the box is only this big and we can't fit in it, imagine how many people that are outside of that box. There's a whole society that we're losing it on, trying to fit them into a space. I think that space is being broken up in so many ways. So that's me and my talk there. And, you know,
I mean, I think that's extremely thought-provoking and very inspiring. Right, and I know you're a fan of Bob Marley, as am I, and that whole what you were talking about really just screamed out emancipation from mental slavery, right? And I just think that, I mean, I wrote a couple of notes as you were talking, but it's, you know, I mentioned the compass of what does it mean to be a man, right? So like I was posing the question as in like, how do we fix this compass, basically, right? Where your suggestion was, let's throw away the goddamn compass. Right? Why do we need a compass to really define what it needs to be a man? Because it's really the societal pressures that we put. It's what we attach ourselves to, right? The standards that we attach ourselves to. Yes, on one side, society could do a better job of, you know, creating better standards for us, a better environment for us to thrive as individuals and not just as men. But we all know that that can take a lot of time, may never even happen, right? So what you can do, your suggestion was to disconnect yourself from that system completely.
be happy with you.
Yeah, exactly, and become a role model for a new way of thinking for men, and that's beautiful actually, and you know, that solves all the issues of, you know, the alpha male and all that stuff that really just is heavy for men, right? And like my whole thing, and I love what you, and I love that we all have different approaches to how we deal with this, and it's because that we're usually left alone to figure all this stuff of ourselves, and I'm hoping that, you know, the audience finds like a lot of this information and, you know, marries and picks what they want to pick out of it, and grow and use it as their own inner compass. And I think it's been incredible. I'm actually extremely humbled by everything that's been shared so far. So John, did you have anything you wanted to speak about when it comes to, you know, society and societal pressures?
Oh, I could probably rant for hours on that, but I'd say, for lack of better words, we need system changes, like big time. And the system that we are now living under, I think, doesn't afford us opportunities to really be who we are, right? Because we still have to live within the context of the culture that we live in.
What are some of those changes, do you think, what would some of those look like, you think?
Well, personally, this is just my own take, and this, again, is going probably way off topic, but, you know, capitalism is a defunct system, and the longer we continue to live under that, we're living under the thumb, right? Because once you gain enough capital, you control the game, and you get to define what people think and not think. And then if everybody's aspiring for, you know, monetary gain or stuff, they're going to overlook a lot of those things. And nobody's going to look at your value from who you are as a person, you know, and I think that's a big thing that we're living through. But that's a massive shift. So what can I do from day to day? Obviously, these discussions are great. I think understanding more, like you used the term alpha, you know, I've been reading a little bit more, and it turns out that might not even be true. The alpha idea, like they used to talk about the alpha wolf, right? And, you know, now there are people who work with wolves in that environment, and they say it doesn't exist. There isn't an alpha wolf. It's much more complex than that. So the idea that there are alpha males out there, all that is sorry.
Who coined the term alpha male?
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Probably a
sure it was
capitalist.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
probably.
So
Yeah.
we're in this thing,
Yeah, well, it's funny, and there is a funny joke. Anyways, to just go side note, the joke is, how do you know who the alpha male in the room is? If you don't, you're it. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
I get it.
you get it?
I
Okay.
do.
Okay. Bad joke, I know.
And Derek, what about you? I mean, I know you work in the world of suicide awareness with Sam. You've obviously been exposed to a lot of the different resources that are out there available, to men and to people who are in ideation or who have survived attempts or family members of. What can you say about the resources and the help that's out there right now for these families and these individuals? Is it enough? And what would you like to see change with Sam?
Well, I can ask you a question. Is healthcare free in Canada?
I'm gonna drink some water.
Is
Again,
healthcare free in
technically-
Canada?
Again,
yes.
now we're getting into system.
Chart
again.
of rights, technically.
Not for
No.
mental health.
Yeah.
Okay, mental health is not covered by Canadian healthcare.
Oh, no?
So when I need to see a
Interesting.
psychiatrist or a therapist for 1 hour, it's going to cost me $250, right? But I don't have $250 because I'm sad and depressed and I'm not going to work right now. So step one would be to provide healthcare in Canada, right? Which would be factor in the psychotherapy is covered by healthcare. Right now, I see a psychotherapist through my insurance company. I don't want to talk. He does a decent job, but it's not what I need. We talk about what are you doing today, and just very low level stuff, right? Are you doing your breathing exercises? It's like, come on, man. Of course, I wrote a book on that. So what I need is proper medical care. I need therapists and psychiatrists and 2 or 3 sessions a week. And that's what not so much now, but when my son died, I needed that. I needed that. I spent a year depressed, when I could have spent maybe 3 months and got back on my feet and back to work again. And so I think that's a major challenge in the Canadian healthcare system, is that it's not covered. It is a common misconception that, healthcare is free in Canada. It's not if you want to hurt yourself, right? They will admit you for 48 hours on a doctor's watch, or maybe you'll get admitted to a formal mental health facility for 2 weeks, maybe a month. But that's about it. After that, you're on your own. You got to pay for the doctor that you need, unless you need simple, basic psychotherapy, which isn't enough.
So I guess then, for us, the main thing would be then how do we help each other more? And this is where we get into community, right?
And that's take the time to understand, you actually take the time to. I mentioned narcissism earlier.
Yep.
Right? Take the time to read up on it, and you'll see what I mean about me wanting to be a race car driver is narcissistic. You understand? By us taking time to better educate ourselves on the subject matter is how we're going to be able to help our peers and our friends, and how we really got to take the time to
Meeting you where you're at.
Yeah, and really understanding what they're going through, because borderline personality disorder looks a lot like bipolar, but it's not bipolar. One is a chemical and one is an emotional imbalance, right? So you can't treat the two the same. So I think by better educating ourselves is how we're going to be able to help other people. Take the time to actually care and do it.
Acie, if I can just contribute one more practical thing. Very simply, we all have sick days as people that are employed by people, right? Sick days, change that name to health days. I don't need to be sick to get a day off because I can't do it today. Do you understand? I don't need to tell myself that I'm sick for wanting to be better. If employers can just do that one small thing, that would be helpful to those men that are seeking help in workspaces.
I like that, small changes. And, I just adding on to, learning about what other people are suffering from, I think that's also, again, as you mentioned, meeting them where they are. I think that's a great form of compassion as well, right? Just connecting with someone based on the circumstances that they're going through in their life, investing that time and energy of yourself to be able to find out about something that not necessarily is affecting them, but to someone that they care about, or even complete stranger. I think that's beautiful. I think we need more of that in society. And I just wanted to thank you for that. Actually, that was very great. So
Actually, how that resonated with me was because I probably didn't really listen to you. I didn't meet you where I should have maybe met you, right? And so when you reiterated that, I heard you. But like a lot of times with guys, and probably especially from my generation, you don't necessarily listen all the time. You're too busy trying to get in there. So thanks for that.
May I pause for a second to highlight something that just took place live? This is a grown man. He noticed he did something. He checked himself and he publicly made himself accountable. Most men, even if you catch them, not my dad, but my dad, we have parents, you catch them in a moment and they're not willing to admit that they're human. And there's something that's so important for a little human being to see that their parents are also human beings. You know what I'm saying? And so this is where these things start. So I'd like to say, John, thank you. I encourage that kind of behavior because when I'm in a workplace and my supervisor messes up and he's too high and mighty to be accountable, this whole system goes out of loop. Only I have to abide by these things. This is the male fellowship. It's got to be equal for you. It's got to be equal for you. So if he can stop and check himself, I can stop and check myself. I think that was beautiful, and I appreciate you for doing that.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate that.
So I think we can probably wrap up on our conversation on the first part. Right? We can take a little break. I mentioned to you you're welcome to join us on the second part, but it's completely up to you. We'll take a little break, a few minutes just to recollect, reflect on everything that we've kind of discussed so far, and come back a little bit strong to discuss the next part of this segment where we're going to talk about leadership, fatherhood, things that would affect us in that way. So if this is it for us, Derek, I wanted to thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I can't really contribute to that conversation in a meaningful way because it's all nothing I really experience. It's all wants and wishes, and I can't really speak on that properly. So I appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate you listening to me rambling on there for a bit. Hopefully you can put some of that story together and take a few pieces out of that. And I hope we can do this again. And I look forward to, keeping in touch with all of you guys. And
For sure.
continuing these conversations. We got to keep this going. So
thanks a lot for your time. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say, I think through your story and how you spoke about your experience, like you exhibit values of a great father, right? And I know that's something that's very important for you, and I know that's something that you want and you wish for, and I know that's going to happen for you one day again. And when it does, like I want to be there for you, supporting any way that I can, with the Ottawa Dads Group and all the great dads that we have here locally, and just let you know that you're not alone, brother, and you are a great father.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Appreciate your time, man.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our panel, the second part of our panel. And we're back, and we're going to discuss, at this time, a very important topic, at least to me, which is fatherhood. And, we are all fathers here on the panel, so I thought we should take this opportunity to be able to share some of our experiences as fathers, maybe some advice for other fathers or people who are looking to become fathers or aspire to become a father one day. I think, personally, the role of a father, the responsibility of a father is something that's extremely important in society and something that's not really highlighted enough. We hear a lot about, great moms and great mom qualities, but the great dad qualities sometimes are not really celebrated that much. And I would think, like in a perfectly balanced world, the role of a mother and a role of a father are different in their own rights, but equally as important. And I know in my life, as a single father, as I've been over the last 7 years, it's been a great growing point for me. It's been a complete turning point in my life. It's been the greatest teacher of my life, I say, is my son and my child and the relationship that we have. And the basis of all this work, why we're all here, why I choose to put these things like this together to keep this conversation going, is because of the world and the legacy that I want to leave for my son and all of our sons and our daughters, to be a better world, because I think there's a lot of wounded masculinity is what I call it in the world. And we are sometimes the perpetrators of that within ourselves. And whatever we can do to bring awareness to healthy parenting is a service that we not only do to ourselves and our families, but to the world as a whole. And with that being said, I wanted to start on a topic that has been affecting my personal life and my dad life. And being a parent is awesome because there's so many different challenges that present themselves as your kids age, right? You know, you have your infant years, then you have your toddler years, then you have the young boy or girl, and then you have socializing in schools, and then you have, dating and love and like all the crazy stuff that we probably put our parents through, right? So like right now, my son is 8. He's about to be 8, and he's learning about acceptance in school. He's learning about friends and like how to be popular in school, and of course bullying, right? The bullying is something that is very prevalent, I think, right? I think there's a lot of anti-bullying campaigns that are now out there. We hear a lot of people talking about it, at least more so than when we were kids in school, right? And I really wanted to pose like a really high-level question when it comes to bullying, because people have, I think the general consensus is that like bullying is wrong. And the campaigns right now are really trying to push the fact that like the schools can go without bullying. On the contrary, sometimes people feel like bullying is a natural kind of mechanism to help grow people into, or young children into, who they need to be, building some forms of resilience. And whether or not you lie on either side of the coin, I myself, who is a father of a child who is coming home and talking about being bullied at school and having things happen to him at school, like regardless of what I think about that conversation on the macro, I'm feeling as a man sometimes powerless, sometimes helpless to be able to help my child, protect my child in the schoolyard. And everyone has their different ways of dealing with it, or different ways of talking to their child about it. I know, if there was no consequences, like there would be different ways that you would want to deal with it. Like, what I mean? Like I hear that stuff sometimes. And the first thing in my head is like, I'm going to go to the school. I'm going to kick the kid's ass. I'm going to kick his dad's ass. I'm going to kick the principal's ass. And I'm going to open up a can of beer like Stone Cold Steve Austin.
You sound like my father.
Exactly. These are things that are like, just deeply rooted within us and the ways that we want to react. But of course, in society, we cannot react that way. So, I mean, it's such a big topic that's like hitting home for me right now. So I just wanted to ask you guys about your personal experiences with your own children or in your own personal lives growing up, if you had to deal with bullying. I know John mentioned that, he was the bully at some points. And like I probably at some points in my life have exhibited bully type behavior as well. I tended to hang out with like the cool kids, the drug dealers and that kind of stuff. And sometimes that's a tactic or a strategy to align yourself strategically in the school. These are all crazy lessons, right? These are the lessons of the schoolyard, right? So it in essence is a very general, broad topic, but also reflects back a lot on masculinity and our role as a father or as a person in the schoolyard, the alpha stuff that we were talking about earlier. So a lot to unpack there, but really I wanted to start with personal experiences with either being a bully or getting bullied and with your children. So maybe start with John.
Beauty before age, or
You go ahead, Lee.
oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Well, shall I rock paper scissors? You want me to go first?
Pardon me?
Do you want me to go first?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm gonna be quick because I want to hear how the former bully is no longer the bully.
Rehabilitated bully.
I gotta talk about this 2 ways. So my daughter's 5, beautiful girl. She's mixed, lives in rural Eastern Ontario. She's got a wonderful community around her. Bullying to me scares the bejeebus out of me because she has an automatic disadvantage by being a person of color. It's a very easy thing to do to people just on the color of their skin. And she hasn't encountered it. And it makes me very uncomfortable to think about the possibility and the eventuality of her experiencing this. This is why I'm busting my head open to do as many things as possible, because there in my community is yet to be a prolific amount of black people, so that community mass creates a certain kind of community respect. We haven't had enough black people in enough places in our community to create a kind of familiarity and normalcy. So there is an opportunity for the trapping of my daughter to run into these, racial situations. And for me, the bullying, the racial aspect for me is the worst part. It's the highest peak of the pyramid that would bother me because that'll stick with you forever. So that's my concern. I will tell you about solutions in a second, but myself personally, you wouldn't get Lee Theater without bullies. I needed the adversaries in my life to produce. I didn't need them, but they were there. And then the choice was, do I become better than them? Do I meet them where they're at? Or do I ignore them? So I'm going to talk about 2 examples. Grade 5, I had a bully in the neighborhood. My brother, he's my brother. My older brother wasn't going to take care of it. It's my issue to take care of. And so after a couple of years of this guy, shout out to Richard, wherever you are, he was just pestering me. And one day, enough was enough. Enough was enough. And I essentially took all the energy that my father put into me, all of those times that I couldn't speak back, talk back, hit back. I couldn't do anything as a child. In this moment, I was going to take all of that emotion and put it together into one form of action and deal with this bully. And so, and I don't encourage anybody to do these things, but this is the truth of the moment. I grabbed a branch out of a bush. I ran up to his house. I rang his doorbell. He came out, and I hit him with it a bunch of times. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was stunned because he didn't see this thing coming. And then I ran back home, and I made it to my house, and I locked my door. And in that moment, I was like that Family Matters moment, that sitcom TV moment where I took care of my bully. But, it didn't make me better. It didn't make me worse. But I know there was a moment in my life where I said enough was enough. And I had to go to that problem. It didn't make me a better person, didn't make him a better person. But that's my bully explanation. The last bully explanation that I'll tell you, and then I'll go into solutions really quickly. Your parents, you're blessed to have them, whether they're good or bad, either way you're alive, because 2 people had a union of a moment. My father, my first teacher, my first everything, I would say that he was a bully. He went to jail twice for domestic violence. And I mean, if you're going to be a bully to my mother, to my brother, to me, and everything else, it's not. Being a bully is making something soft of a very real situation. Okay, you have some hardships in yourself, and people are suffering that. So all of that to say is, I had to grow up in a way that I had to maneuver around that energy and still produce good outcomes at the risk of failure. Failure creates bad outcomes. So you have to be next to a sleeping dragon, be able to wash your dishes, make your food, and not wake that dragon up. So that adversarial tension kind of created a place in my mind where I could balance 2 emotions, plus at the same time, what does the situation call for? What are my emotions in the moment? And what needs to happen, right? So I'm grateful for the life that I had. We can all be better without our bullies. But we also have to be mindful that the life isn't easy. If we watch The Animal Kingdom, that lion is going to eat that gazelle. There's no bullying about it. That's just the way the world works. But we are sentient beings. I have the ability to look at you and say, that hurts. I don't need to do that to you. So all of that to say, solutions for the kids at home, for the ones that don't have people that are guiding them. What I would say to you is, you're given something at birth. It's something that can never be taken from you, and that's your name. If you don't have your parents with you, I want you in the dark of the dark places to say your name. Nobody can take that from you. And in your name, you have strength. So, in the very basic, know who you are, and it starts with your name. What do you want your name to mean? And if you've got somebody that's bothering you, you've got to ask yourself, what character do I want to be? Am I going to be a weak person? Am I going to be a strong person? Am I going to survive this? Also realize there's a time and a season for everything. Not everything is going to stay the same. So how you're going to come out the other side is also up to you. So I'm going to say those things. And to you, because you introduced the point that your son's 8 years old, I'm going to give a big shout out to the Cornwall Boys and Girls Club of SD&G as well. I've been a mentor. I've been on the board. I've watched kids go through the after-school program. I've watched them age into adolescents, teenagers, adults. I've met them in the streets. And what I'm telling you is that organization does a really good after-school program. And I'm telling you, the kids that I got to watch, they didn't have that language with each other. They were very good and very wholesome to one another. And I think those spaces and places should be promoted, because as parents, we may not be able to do everything. We may not have the language and understanding. But if you let the specialists specialize, we can benefit from that. So that's my dropping of knowledge. I could say a million more things, but John, I'm keen, buddy.
Keen on my experiences of being bullied. Well, I grew up in a bully environment, so I was second nature overall. Just unfortunately, my brother was quite violent, and I was surrounded all the time. And one of my early memories was when I was getting a beating, and I started to cry, and he stopped. And I thought, finally, he's going to stop. And then he looked down at me, and he basically said, "You fucking faker," and continued the beating. And I realized at that moment, okay, nobody's coming to help. So anyways, I fast forward, small kid, high school, tiny, first real altercation with another kid, and bigger, taller, everything. And I remember him punching me in the head, and because we're fighting outside, and my first thought was, Mark hits a lot harder than you. and I realized at that moment he couldn't hurt me, and I basically wiped the pavement with him. And that made me feel awesome. It gave me new life, and I realized, okay, I could take care of myself, and I'll use that. So again, fast forward again from that, a lot of years of combative life. I became a bully myself, so unfortunately. So my little story in relation to your kid in school getting bullied, my daughter at one point, she would have been around 5, I guess, same as your daughter's age right now. She got pushed into a wall, and when she put her hand up to break the fall or the hitting of the wall, she fractured her wrist. And it was a little boy who was a bully. And I remember, okay, how do you deal with this? And my daughter's asking me, Daddy, well, basically you're going to protect me. So I went and had a conversation with the principal. And I said, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to deal with this appropriately, or I'm going to. And guess what? It got taken care of. And another note, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's just as a father, that's my protective nature. Somebody that I know, his son was a black belt in karate, and he was 14 or 15, and he was being bullied at school. And my friend went to the principal and said, look, my son's a black belt, and you're going to have this stop immediately, or my son's going to beat the shit out of this boy. And the principal goes, are you threatening violence? He goes, that's exactly what I'm doing.
It's present. You need to stop it.
And guess what? It was taken care of. Now, are these appropriate? I'd say yes, in the sense of we need to talk to the authorities, and the authorities in the situation need to rectify that. And that is their job. We need to hold them to task that you're the educator, you're the person here that's taking care of these children, and if you're not going to make the environment safe, then obviously we're going to have to, and they will if you hold them to task. And that's probably the biggest thing I would say from that kind of stuff.
I really do think the schools have a certain amount of accountability for the children and a certain level of protection that they have to do with the children. So I've surveyed a lot of men when it came to the experiences that I'm going through with my son and everything, and other parents who have their kids bullied too, and it just breaks my heart, right? A lot of my friends and other dads within my network are always talking about their children being bullied and constantly being bullied, right? So it's almost like you're asking the principals, you're asking the superintendent, they're CCing everyone on the entire board to do something about this. And, they say that they're going to do something about it. They try measures, but it just keeps happening. It keeps happening, right? And for me, the reason that I think that I find the most suffering in something like this is because I put myself in my child's shoes, right? And it takes me back to a time where I had acceptance issues in the schoolyard too. And what did I do in order to make myself feel better in the moment? And if I really think about it, where did that really lead me into my life, right? Of continuing having acceptance issues, rolling with gangs and violence just to be protected, right? Instead of dealing with it, in the ways that you've suggested in dealing with it, which is more proactive, which is more introspective. But I think I grew up in a society, and I don't think today's society is any much better, where you really had to you soothe yourself, right? You soothe yourself because of you get temporary quick fixes, bandage solutions, join a gang. You know what I mean? Like you act out, but you don't go within.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go within. So yeah, a part of me really wants him to be okay. So like I made a joke the other day on the story. Is like I can't think of anything else to advise my son other than to join a gang or form a gang at school. Right? He's only 8. But it was a joke. I was just being cheeky. But there are better ways to deal with the situation in his shoes, right? And these are ways that I wasn't able to do when I was his age, right? So in some ways, like I'm still learning how to maybe almost having a second chance as into like how would I have dealt with this differently.
Well, and ultimately, it still has to fall on the educators. Like it is their job. You can't be there. Now, you can make it clear you will be there at some point if this isn't taken care of. And I believe that people will be much more proactive at that moment. They're not going to be CCing at each other and the whole bit. They're going to go, oh shit, I need to get
John's pulling up.
You got
his
it.
trucks are.
You got it. You got it. They will think that. Like I went into for my daughter, I went into the principal. I looked her right in the face. And then she went and explained to me, the child comes from a single parent home. He's got a lot of issues and the whole bit. I said, yeah, okay. But if you don't talk to her, the mother and the child, I will. And it was taken care of.
May I touch on this real quick?
Of course.
So what is a bully, right? We're not going to do that definition thing, but apples and trees, right? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but it's also a nature of its environment. Now, I was a product of a single parent household. I'm not going to make excuses for people, but there are conditions that exist. Now, how do we get into a single parent situation? Where are the men? What is the commitment? And by that, listen, if the lady wants to ask you to leave, you can leave. Like all of those things are dynamics. But what I'm saying is our society, especially within my Black community, and I mean this across the continent, the absence of fathers creates societies that want to be fatherless. And by that, I mean you're going to have kids raising kids. You're going to have kids who are going to get second, third, fourth jobs to pay the rent, who are not going to be able to be kids. And that brings me back to my feeling with you. When you put yourself in your kid's shoes and you feel that feeling, the problem with bullying is it robs the innocence of childhood. The kid's supposed to go to school and just be a kid, and now they've got a fear. They've got a monster in the bed that's living next to them. I got to go to work my 8 hours. I can't protect my kid. Society's supposed to operate in a way where this kid goes to school. So as much as the teachers and the principals are there and the resources are strapped, I like to look at the source of the problem. How did this bully come into being? And yes, you can tell me about the household, but what is society doing to produce so many? Like, why can't a man stay in that position? What is... There's something that is there, right? Like, and I can't get into all of it, but what is a bully and what are the conditions of a bully? We can't solve that issue. Yeah. The authority figures have to do stuff. Resources have to be there. But to our kids, what are we going to do? I, as a father, have to be present so that my daughter doesn't have an absence of a male in her life and she doesn't grow up to become a bully. Does that make sense? Like what I need to solve your problem by solving my problem. Like we are all in this together, as it were.
Yeah. I think there's, something to be said about the absence of a father as well as, the presence of a father. In some ways, they both could go very wrong. Mm-hmm. And the concept of the apple and the tree, we're going to touch upon a lot when we talk about ancestral trauma in a little bit. But I really wanted to reflect before we move on to that topic about what you originally said about talking to your child, having that conversation with your child. And I really loved it about you were saying like, and as you were saying that, like I pictured myself having this conversation with my son, or like, I'm not always going to be there for you. I'm not going to always be able to pull my truck up and start scaring everybody, but who do you want to be? Right. Who is the character that you want to be in your story? Right. And just really empowering them, lighting that fire within themselves to really look at that at such a young age. Right? Because I don't think it's too young to have that conversation because like kids this age are enamored with superheroes, right? They understand what it means to be a superhero. They understand, the difference between good and evil, and who do you want to be? How is your superhero going to respond in this situation, and how can you embody that? And I love that, and I think that's something that would really work. So I'm going to give that a try. So
it's interesting when you say that. Like, what resonated in my head when I was listening to you is the sense of they're not too young to have that conversation. When you look at indigenous communities, or some of them, and I've seen, National Geographic and different things. You have 4-year-olds with razor sharp knives working on stuff at 4. And yet, what are we doing with our kids? We infantilize them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, there are different stages that you should be taking your child through, but there's also things that they're pretty resilient,
Durable
people,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to acknowledge that we don't need to be babying them so much. And opening up a conversation is that letting them play with a sharp knife, right?
And if I can be really, really quick with this, okay. So there's the side of being sensitive to our kids. As a male, we got to use more words, touch our emotions, and let them have a place in the world, right? But then there's also a challenge of a generation of kids that I would be hiring that are so, not all of them, but they're soft, they're supple, they're not task-oriented. They can't pick up a broom because it's too much work. I need to encourage them. And so we're getting into a society where action does have to exist for this world. In order for this table to be made, somebody had to put their back into it. In order for this, this microphone, the technology, somebody had to sit and think and work through the problems. I think a lot of our society is going to get lost to people that are not going to be willing to work through the problems. But I'm not saying that a bully is the proper representation of a problem to be worked through, but what I'm saying is, in addressing the bully situation, just as a vessel for thought, we might inadvertently be creating individuals that are not able to cope with just basic stress. Go over there and do that thing.
Normal stress.
Normal stress. Not even like the life stress of separation of spouse, loss of life, loss of job. Like, these are real things that happen to people everywhere. And if our kids don't have the ability to take on the weight of pain, I'm concerned about the future chapters of life for a lot of people. Not just me, though.
Resiliency, right? I think
It's
that's
key.
basically building the resiliency.
It's
Yeah,
key.
and so that's basically like the original thing I was talking about. Like, our bully is really a necessary mechanism in the schoolyard.
Partially.
Yeah, who knows? I'm not going to make.
I would say no. Life's hard enough, but how do we get our bullies? Anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So hey, that's great. So let's move on to the topic of ancestral trauma, which I call daddy issues for men. That's a coin that I've termed, a term that I've coined. Sorry, and I think it's just daddy issues is something that generally people talk mostly about women, right, and having the daddy issues. But then and I was mentioning the presence or the absence of a father has a very profound effect on men. And maybe next year we can talk about mommy issues for men, because that's a real thing too. But this year let's stick to the daddy thing. And so when I say ancestral trauma, I think a lot of people have like a very spiritual understanding of it. Sometimes some people, it might be a foreign concept to it. So when I kind of like water it down to daddy issues for men, in my opinion, it's really just everything that we talked about, right? If you are a bully in school, where does it come from? Usually it probably comes from home, right? You probably see your dad bullying your mom, or your mom's boss bullying her, or other bullies in the school who are older brothers bullying, just like in John's case, right? So again, it's with the apple falling not far from the tree. Maybe sometimes it's even beyond that, than what's going on at home. The whole concept of like the ancestral trauma and all that kind of stuff is that like it's been raining down from generations and generations. I know in my circumstance, I spoke to a psychic medium actually. It's just such a weird story. It was just a business meeting, networking conversation that I had with him, but he had very special in-tune powers. And right away he noticed that like my grandpa, who I've never really known and only known for like a year in my life when he came to visit Canada, and he's now passed away, but he's told me that my grandma's always around me. And he's around me because he wants me to reconcile things with my father, because my father was very, very hands-off with me. We still don't have a very great relationship. And because there's been so much, the common theme that's been raining down through generations in my family has been anger, right? And just dealing with anger and just the effect that it's had on future generations, on my father, on his self-esteem, on myself and my self-esteem. And he noticed that, he told me that like I'm the first generation to actually shield and protect my own son from this anger. And I really feel it. And it's funny because I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and I noticed like we were about to leave a bar, right? And I had a bag with me, and like I'm super clumsy, right? That's one thing you guys need to know about me. I try to be stoic. I have a James Bond tattoo. Like James Bond doesn't make mistakes, right? I'm one of the clumsiest people you'll ever meet. Right, so as I'm walking out of this bar, like I turn this bag and and I've already been dropping shit that whole night, right? Like I dropped my fork and dropped my papers everywhere. So as I'm about to leave, like but this glass falls off the table and breaks, right? Smashes. Everyone's looking at me in the bar, and like I just had to laugh at myself at that time. But there was a point in time where like I was at home being very clumsy, right? And every time that I spilled something or I broke something, like my dad would get very, very angry with me. Not only would he get angry with me, sometimes he would like emotionally abuse me too. He'll either tell me like, I always do this happens all the time, or like, is there anything you don't break, or everything that's broken in the house is your fault. And like, I guess he didn't realize like how much that really affected my self-esteem, my ability to try new things, and to really just put myself out there, really, right? I always thought that I would just mess everything up all the time. And then I noticed when my son at home, because I mean, kids spill stuff, right? It happens, right? Are you gonna cry over spilled milk, right? I know that's a saying, but that's a saying that I never really understood growing up. And like every time that he would spill something or break something could fall off the table. Like I remember when he was younger, like how I would react, and I reacted exactly like my father, right? Exactly. I would be, I'd either act like, oh, you know what I mean, like very frustrated, or like lashing back at him, and then kind of yelling at him a little bit. And it wasn't until his mother, because I'm not with his mother anymore, told me that he had a conversation with her saying that like he gets really scared when that happens, right? And he really just, like if he spills something in another room or he breaks something in another room, he was likely to hide it from me. You know, he wouldn't even tell me about it. And I was like right away, like everything came rushing into me. I was like, okay, shit, this is exactly what happened between me and my dad. I do not want him to turn out how I turned out, like really questioning my worth with like everybody, like whether it was at school, friends, relationships. I had no self-worth. Like
Self-doubt is infectious, isn't it?
100%, and it rains down, right? And it's like, not only is it infectious, it's a mirror image across different generations. It's almost like I use the exact same words, the exact same tone, and and he felt it. Like kids are so intuitive; they're like lightning rods, right? When it comes to emotions, and I like right away I was like, okay, I still get that reaction sometimes, right? Because it's still a part of me. But now it's like when he spills something and breaks something, and honestly, like I'm way clumsier than him. All right, like he's very, very good for a child. So every time he spills something, it's fine. Like I know it's just he's not trying to do it on purpose, right?
But you have a check. You get the reaction, and you're like,
to.
I've been here before. I'm not gonna pass this on.
Well, I still get upset. I'm just like, but then I just have to not say anything.
Correct.
And I just have to be like, it's okay. You know, it's okay. It's no big deal. We'll clean it up. It's whatever. You know what I mean? That's it. So, and I've noticed how over the last couple of years, because this has been like a 2-year thing now, he's starting to respond a little bit better. Our relationship has already gotten better. And now he's dealing with all the stuff at school, but this is one less thing to deal with. And I thought that that was a very important milestone in my fatherhood journey. Something small like that, and something that I could reflect on my past. And this is like what a lot of people call conscious parenting, I think, right? Just being conscious of your actions, your traumas, and like what you're raining down on your children. And I'm a big advocate for this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I just wanted to share my story there and about ancestral trauma and daddy issues.
Self-awareness is the first step to everything, right? So you were able to see yourself in the moment and go, okay, if I go beyond this, this is what it's going to do. And so I'm going to stop this so that the effect of this doesn't continue on. So thank you for being self-aware. You know what you just did there? You stopped generational trauma from being passed on, right?
There's this great image that I'm going to post it up when I edit this video about... you guys have probably seen it, right? And it's like a great grandpa telling me like, you're stupid. And then next one after him, the grandpa, you're not good enough. And then like the grandpa telling the dad, like, you suck, right? And then there's a guy with a shield like this, and then like giving a thumbs up right here to the camera. And then there's another father there with his child, and the child's just like painting, and like he has his arm over him and stuff like that, right? So that's like the perfect painting or the perfect meme representation of ancestral trauma. I also have another piece of artwork that I actually bought, and it's inside my office right now. Maybe I'll put a picture of that up on the screen too. But it's I don't know if you guys are fans of The Simpsons or are familiar with The Simpsons. You know how like Homer always chokes Bart?
Yep.
And like his eyes like kind of pop out of his head and everything like that. Yep. So this artist at like the Plaster Orleans, Jackson and I were just walking in the mall, and like he points out, he's like, oh, look, Simpsons, right? And it was like Grandpa Simpson, Abe Simpson, choking Homer, and Homer's choking Bart at the same time. So it was like, I'm like, this is perfect for the work that I do and all the stuff that I talk about when it comes to daddy issues. So I bought it right away, and it's now inside my studio at home. So like, it's really
apples and trees.
It's just a reminder of like, it's because that picture is symbolic because it's like simultaneous. It's happening at the same time.
Interesting.
And I think ancestral trauma and all this stuff does happen at the same time. Even if the grandparents and great-grandparents are gone from generations, it's still happening. If you don't stop it, it's still happening.
what's your cultural heritage?
Oh, I'm Vietnamese. Yeah,
Vietnamese.
yeah, Southeast
Okay.
Asian.
So, your family came from another country. In that other country, are the cultural norms or the expectations of the people that live there the same as the cultural norms and expectations of the
Today?
people?
Oh, of course not.
Not
Of course
today, not
No, you
ever,
get-
per
no,
se.
You get your ass
Different
beat over there,
countries.
right?
That's right,
It was,
John.
it was normal. So we have to. I think we have to forgive, but I'm still going through that.
But this is the challenge: is we get it from somewhere, right? And so I'm not going to say because we're from Haiti, that's how all Haitians are. But what I'm saying is, both my parents came from Haiti. Both my parents were raised a certain way. The conduct and the cultural requirements of Haiti are totally different than the standards of the cultural requirements of here. And so what I'm saying is, we are only going to borrow what's been given. And in that time, this is what we learn. And so you and I, John has done this work himself, but we have to be aware of what served us and helped us get better and get to this point, and what is not going to serve us. Evolution is a very interesting thing. What evolution requires is the offspring to not make the mistakes that the parents made in order to survive. Do you follow? So when your son passes on their gifts and skills to their child, it's because you have decided that we're going to wash away these things, I'm going to give you these things, and that's how they're going to continue. Your lineage is going to continue to succeed based on what skill sets we're going to pass on to them. So when those skill sets come from our culture. You follow?
And it's a choice, is what you're saying, in order
It
to stop
is.
that flow, or
is.
filter that water, I guess.
To a certain degree, in the absence of good choices, there are only bad choices. Some people can come here all they want. They can want to be the best thing all they want, but if they don't have enough good options or opportunities to go explore that goodness, they're not. It has no. room to
I
grow.
guess that they need to have that opportunity and those options to be able to do that as well. And I do feel grateful and blessed to be able to be in a position to be able to wash these things from my ancestral trauma. But I know in many people's situations, it's not always the first priority, right? The first priority is putting food on the table sometimes, right? So I recognize that too.
There's comes from a musical, South Pacific, I think it is.
Okay.
You can look it up, but the song is, and this is just a clip of it, but it goes, children have to be taught, carefully taught, how to hate and fear from year to year. They have to be taught before it's too late, before they're 6, 7, or 8. And then it goes on about, different eyes and whatever. But that
Is the window of time.
the gist of it, right? When they're young, and if you don't help shape them, or if you do help shape them, you got to really watch what you're shaping them to be. So good on you, because your son's at that age. You're already getting him past that fear of you, and he's seeing now more the love of you, and that's awesome. Like that's what a father is, isn't it? Yeah. And you're being his protector, and so you're actually, I think, helping him with his bullying just by that, because if he doesn't fear you, he probably will be less likely to fear the bully. Now
Correct.
you're going to give him other skill set, hopefully, and maybe you will have to go talk to the principal or something. But you know what I mean? But good on you that you're aware of that.
That was really amazing, because like when you said that, I really reflected on like maybe I always had a fear of my father. Maybe it's still a little bit still there.
Oh, of course,
in me.
it is.
And like if you have that at such a young age with your child and it never goes away, then that like imagine how many years that relationship has basically gone sour.
Yeah.
And how many years it's going to take to come back and try
Well,
to
and it
if it ever fixes.
and it shapes you for everybody that you interact with. Like
That's true, yeah.
I recognize my anger because of where I came from has permeated my entire existence. Yeah. And mostly in a lot of negative ways. Now, I'm fortunate in the sense that I am a little introspective, so I think I've gotten better in that regard, but I still have that anger. So there's an element of me that just my whole demeanor, my face changes, my posturing changes, even when I don't even realize it, because I practiced it.
Mm-hmm.
You learn defensive techniques, right? So I learned how to be tough and mean looking and the whole bit. Well, when I get passionate, that face comes out. People go, "Why are you angry?" I'm not angry.
I'm excited.
Yeah, exactly. But we keep things that served us at one point, but then they no longer serve us. And how do you reshape yourself? And isn't that what we're attempting to do with this?
An interesting thing I want to because we're talking about protecting the future generation, right? But if we were to turn around, let's look at the generations that came before us, right? Knowing what we know now, and we're supposed to forgive them because that's all they really knew. That's the way that they grew up. But that's something that I struggle with sometimes, right? So I think we are on the right track about like what we need to do with our children, the message that we need to spread down. But turning around now, how do you turn around without resentment? How do you forgive, and how do you not let that continue to affect you as a man?
Well, Lee's living it a little more than me. Like, so my abuser's dead, right?
But even so, right?
No, it still impacts me. But I think Lee and yourself, you have that parental, that figure still in your life. So you have to reconcile and go through that.
Do I have to reconcile that?
Yeah, I think you do.
With yourself.
With yourself, not necessarily with the person, but if you don't reconcile
ourselves,
with yourself, then you're always going to have it.
Well, I had therapy after my divorce, right, for the first time, like extensively in my life, and we dug very deeply into like my own daddy issues and everything that happened there that led to all the events that led to my divorce. And one thing that was causing me a lot of pain at the time was that like I felt like I didn't do enough to bridge that gap with my father, right? I felt like I didn't do enough to reach out to him and like try to fix that relationship. But the therapist told me something that really changed my life. It was probably the most important thing in that entire conversation, where that he was like, it wasn't your job, it wasn't my job.
Correct.
It was his job.
Yeah.
It was my father to reach out and like to bridge that connection with me, and he didn't do that, right? So like I needed to forgive myself for thinking that it was my job. Really, but then again, now after that, reflecting is like, okay, well, it's still his job, right? And I've tried to have conversations about it, especially during that time about the divorce too, because the subject matter of my divorce was very similar to his marital problems with my mom, and I still didn't get the guidance or anything, any type of warmth at all, actually. And that really still, because I was again still trying to figure it out on my own, still trying to figure out how to be a man, still trying to figure out how to be a man again based on society, based on Hollywood, and not from this guy. You know what I mean? So it was very, very difficult. It's still a difficult route. Like we really don't talk much. I can probably count on one hand how many times we talk in a year.
And he has still left an indelible imprint on you, because part of who you are is from him.
Part of the reason that we're here today, and the part of the reason that I do my men's mental health is because of him.
That's right.
And my relationship with him.
But what I mean by that is you still own a piece of him. Like I know I own a piece of my brother. And as much as I like to be different than that, there's still part of that element. And that, how do you come to terms with that is a challenge, right?
I think to answer, or partly, or to contribute to an answer, I think we have to give ourselves permission to be our own people. There's this weird thing where, like, yes, we were given life by two individuals, and those two individuals are our parents. But there's this weird, like, halo effect that, okay, because they're our parents, they're not individuals. And just because they're our parents, I will always be a child. No.
Well, you know, societies like our minority societies, and especially in Southeast Asia, where like you have to really respect your elders.
You do. Don't get me wrong.
But I'm just saying that's where it comes from.
We're not wrong in that sense. However, when we give that much laneway, sometimes our parents are not fully developed human beings.
Sometimes.
You follow? So,
You know, but
here we are.
My biggest life lesson, I would say, for me, and I laugh because I used to always think my elders were wise. And I eventually came to realize that you're only wise if you apply the information that you learn as you go along.
Correct.
And I've met enough 80-year-olds
Still not getting it.
that are freaking
They have wisdom. That
clueless.
doesn't
And they're
necessarily
not.
mean they're wise.
No, exactly. Well, they don't even have wisdom. They have a lot of knowledge, maybe, but they don't apply any of it, right? So,
I think once you give yourself permission to be an individual separate from the family entity, and you say, you know what, I don't have to do it, and I don't have to seek your permission either. The second thing is live your life in such a way that it is evidence and proof that their way of doing it was wrong. I look forward to the moment I get to see my father next. When I get to see him next, I get to say thank you for all the things you gave me and all the things you didn't give me. My community labeled me the Citizen of the Year. What does that mean to you? How did we get there? And what is missing? Wouldn't it have been cool if there were two of us? Imagine if I'm so good doing all these things that I'm doing by myself. Imagine if you're doing those things too, Dad. There would have been double this good energy. So what I'm saying is, we can identify what we don't like. We can have a challenge with the previous generation. But in the life that we have now, I don't think it's fully fair to, unless your soul needs it, to really force yourself to commit to living a resolution for something that's past. If they want to be there, they're going to be there. I'm going to go give an invitation, but I'm not going to spend the time chasing it down. If you know that you suffered something as a child and that person hasn't shown you the self-awareness, because that's the first step. Because how can I tell you that this hurt me if you never thought you hurt me? I'm going to be doing this for too long. Why waste the energy? Go live a good life, come back to them. If they love you, they'll miss you. And they're going to have to concede that, like, maybe it's not worth the distance between us for me to hold on to this dumb ideology that I noticed didn't even serve you. I'm so proud of you, my child. You did better than I did. Can we be equals? Tell me how you did the thing that you did. Can I bask in this wonderful thing that you've become? Like, I wouldn't waste the time on seeking, but I'm one of 3 siblings. There are people that are only one individual, 2 parents. That's all the family they have. Maybe they need that sense of worth. It's a very challenging thing to say, but I wouldn't chase it, man, because they didn't chase you.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. So you never really had that chip on the shoulder kind of feeling?
All the time, man. But that chip wouldn't allow me to get in this room with you fine people. We got to do something with that chip. That chip doesn't, if it didn't work for you, why would that chip work for, if that chip was from somebody else and didn't work for them and they passed that chip on? I have lots of chips, but what does society need? Society needs more fully formed people. Do my chips work in our society? Do they help make it better? Can I be a better man and overcome my chips so that I can produce what is needed for me, for somebody else? I have chips, but it doesn't work.
That takes us back full circle, right? So the bully aspect is what got us here.
Mm-hmm.
Got you here, got you here, got me here.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly it got Derek here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so full circle.
Get rid of the cycle.
Yeah.
Okay, that's incredible. So I think we're going to talk about some of the resources that we recommend around men's mental health and that we can help people with, right? Because I know, like, our journey, a lot of the times we have to seek our own resources and on what we're learning and how we want to grow, right? So I mean, I guess I'll start, like, one of the most important books that actually started me on this journey for men's mental health is called The Mask of Masculinity. Basically, it's by Lewis Howes, who's a very famous podcaster. And I just love how the book is written. It's extremely written in a practical way. And it really just clarifies a lot about the different masks that men wear that helps them align to their own concept of masculinity, right? For example, some of these masks are like the jock mask, like the sports mask, right? Some of them are like the alpha mask. Like, always have to be the alpha, so I wear the mask that makes me always the alpha. One of them is like the know-it-all mask. Gotta be really smart. One of them is the material mask. I have to buy a lot of like really fine, like, expensive things so that people think that I have power and stuff like that. But the whole idea of the book is recognizing what these masks are, and if we're wearing a combination of these masks, and one of them is a stoic mask as well. And then it's the work is that, like, you have to remove the mask now to become your true authentic self. And what does that look like, removing that particular mask? So, like, when you read through this book, you're like, oh wow, sometimes I've wore that. And one of them's like a sexual mask. That's one that really sat with me for a while, because for a while I was like, I didn't have self-worth. I was like, my self-worth was like the girlfriend that I was with, and she has to be beautiful and she has to be this and this and this, only to make me feel like a man. And that's like an extremely selfish concept, right? Because you can't really connect with this person deeply. All you care about is like what other people think about you when they see you with this girl, you know? So this book was great, and I thought it was like super practical, and I thought it was like a really good high level kind of book that, like, anyone who's maybe struggling with their own mental health when it comes to any of the, the risk factors that we were talking about earlier with suicide, or like different traits of masculinity that are, celebrated by society. It's a great way to get behind all that kind of stuff. So, like, that's always the first book that I recommend to anybody when it comes to men's mental health. So I was wondering if you guys had a resource similar to that to share with the audience.
Yeah, no.
What? You don't read books?
Yeah,
Come on.
I haven't read it. I've read a lot of different things about men, but nothing that really resonated.
It doesn't need to be a book. It could be a podcast, a speaker,
Okay,
anything, a figure.
I recently, I'm going to say maybe 8 months ago, saw a counselor. His name's Mike Taylor, and it was The Man Within is his website. And first guy that I ever let work that I worked well with. And so I was able to relate to a lot of things. And one of the things it really helped me with, it was much of my value throughout my life, and this is something I'm still working with, is my value was determined by how well I did at things. So if I was a good athlete, I was always a quick thinker, all of these things. A couple of years ago, or like almost 3 years ago, I had a heart attack, and I lost a vast chunk of my physical prowess. My brain doesn't function quite as well as it used to, and I devalued myself. So he actually brought that up. Like, he didn't say it like that, but it made me realize that. So that was a resource for me.
Great.
The man within, he's a counselor, Mike Taylor. Yeah.
Awesome. And Lee?
Well, I brought a list. Okay. So we talked about that sick days, turning sick days to health days. That's one. Managing your ego by managing your space. So I know how to work a camera. I know how to speak into a microphone. I will not walk into this space and say, you know what, I've done it once or twice. I know exactly what I'm doing, and you're going to do it my way or else, or I'm not going to take part in this thing, and da. Yo, I've got specialists, people that have been living this way. I don't have to be that person. There's this weird thing, and you will have this experience with our kids, right? Where we know how to do something, but our kid wants to show us how to do something. I had a beautiful moment during COVID when everything was shut down. I've got my daughter. We're in an apartment building. Can't take her to like playground at the time, So I've got to be functional with my child. We had a game that we played we still play it. It's called Chase, and we would just run through the hallway. She's like a little 2-year-old, 3-year-old kid, 4-year-old kid, or mine is smaller than mine. Here I am trying to be this athletic guy. And I'm like, you want to play chase? I'm going to show you how fast looks. And I remember beating her to the end of the hallway. And she stopped halfway and she started crying. And I was like, oh, what just happened? What just happened here? And I went and I spoke with her. I said, what's wrong? She's like, I didn't want you to race me. I just wanted you to run with me. Boom! Where's my ego? So all of that to say is you can manage your ego by managing the space. Be aware of where you are and your place in that space. The power of tears and the power of smiles. Really quickly. As a male, we've been brought up, you got to be strong, you got to hold it in, you got to build that durability, be strong. It's not that big of a deal, X, Y, and Z. You know what tears do? Tears are a physiological mark in your mind and in your body that this thing that's making you so uncomfortable can't happen again. When you cry and you let it out, you are creating a mark in your mind that I don't want to go back to that place. Think about all of the things that we haven't reconciled in ourselves, that we haven't given tears for. Our body, per se, I'm not going to say that it's going to happen all the time. You're less likely to do it again if you cried.
Jeez.
Okay? As a male. That's just me.
I haven't cried for years.
Wow.
I'm in trouble.
The second thing is the power of smile. So I'm a black male, okay? In my culture, and I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody. There's some beautiful things that happen that I can't speak on. But growing up, you got to be hard. You got to be hard. In my high school growing up, what? Huh? St. Thomas Aquinas, GTA, Brampton. What I'm saying is there wasn't a place for smiles. There wasn't a place for like being cordial. Like, you're soft. If you're soft, you need to go that way. The hard folks are going to go this way. Where do you need to be? And so the power of a smile is when I'm a young black man and I don't see other older black men smiling, what's the value of a smile for me? I want to be hard too now. But guess what the world needs? It doesn't need more hard men. It needs more men that are willing to smile, because we need to see that there are reasons to smile in this world, and that only exists if I see a smile on somebody else's face. And in my community, it's not something we practice, but there are reasons why black men aren't smiley people in my history and time. Things have changed. Books. One book is called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert F. Greene. That is a key book, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not a lazy man, but I'm also not a super. I've got too many things going on. This book, the way it's broken down is it gives you a law, and then it'll give you the story of the law. It'll give you a little Aesop fable or a little parable, like as an example of it in the margin. So if you don't want to read a full chapter, you can read just a little itty bitty strip. But then at the end, it gives you the reversal of the law. When does this law not apply itself? So there are 48 laws. I've read this book. I've purchased this book. I've gifted it out. For a male, what it really does is it gives you very real historical value, but also gives you a spiritual aspect. And it gives you kind of tools around these, universal laws of sorts this one author has put together. The Four Amendments. I read this in college. I will tell you that it's a graceful book. It helps to package your spirit in such a way that you can expect bad things to happen, but also know how to deal with bad things and how to just be a more full person and deal with some of the conflicts that you might have in the past. So those are my two books, 48 Laws of Power and The Four Amendments.
Amendments or agreements?
Four agreements. I keep saying amendments.
Agreements,
Yeah,
so that's the
yeah.
one.
Yeah, those are
That's
no.
a great
Yeah,
book
cool,
as well.
cool.
Very
Thank you,
fantastic
thank
book.
Yeah, that's me.
All right, fantastic. Well, you know what? Just reflecting before we close, and maybe I'll just add it a part of my close. But I wanted to ask just a fun question, okay? In terms of role models, right? And we're not talking about fathers here. We're just talking about like public figures. It could be anybody. Who would you say would be one or two role models, or it could be someone famous or anybody for you who would embody like a strong male role model figure? So just for example, I'll go first because like I didn't, it just wasn't on the script. You guys weren't ready for this, but all over my house I have posters of Bob Marley and Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee, being an Asian man myself, was very inspirational because I've dealt with a lot of insecurities myself of being seen as an Asian man. So just watching his spirituality, his strength, his swag, how much he was loved, and like how much of a badass he was. Like I just totally loved that, and how like in tune he was and wise. And Bob Marley just being a rebel, standing up, being super talented, a musician, a magician, really just like extremely influential, you know, like with powerful, influential, but non-violent means, right? The power to unite people. So those were my two. Can I just ask you guys that same question?
I don't really have.
No.
Interesting.
I'm not watching a football game with you. You got to have some kind of hero. You kind of, hey, what would Shaft do?
Oh, you know, actually, it's kind of weird. I guess my first, my mentor at one point, Louis. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. So, like you, there was a period of time for those that are home that are a little bit younger where what was presented on the TV didn't necessarily reflect all of the value of diversity that was in the communities that exist. So, I'm named Lee. My father's idol was Bruce Lee.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So, there's that aspect. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Bruce Lee, Bob Marley, and my mother. She doesn't have a mustache, but that lady lifted and moved and made miracles happen. And I know she's not a male, but I've got to give it to her because in the absence of that strength of being able to like come from another country, learn another language, raise 3 kids, go to school, hold down jobs, feed the kids, man, you know. So those are my idols, and yeah, there's many more, but those are the ones that I return to, you know, and I won't get into it all, but like, yeah, those would be the ones that I put forward.
So,
Excellent.
because you posed the question from a male perspective, I had a hard time with it just because my relationship with men just has been relatively non-existent. But I'll go back to my mother.
Yeah, man.
There you go.
So I had a single mother. My father died very young in a car accident, left my mother with 3 kids. She went back to university, got a master's in social work while raising 3 kids. I was 20 months. My brother was 5. My sister was 7. Unbelievable, powerful, and traditional loving woman. And without her, I'd either be dead or in jail. So,
Since we're all on the subject, shout out to my mom too. And the centerpiece of and the foundation of my family, definitely, no doubt about it. Did you?
Can we close by doing something really cool?
Sure. What do you want to do?
Could we say something that we probably haven't said? If I had an opportunity to speak to my father right now, if I had an opportunity to speak to my bully, if I had an opportunity to speak to my 12-year-old self, if I had an opportunity to speak to a male that is hurting, could we take a moment?
Let's take that and let's turn it into just our message, our final message. Yeah.
Cool.
So how about you start?
To the men that are out there in the world that are uncertain as to what your place is in your talents and your skills. If you've been gifted with a child, then you've been gifted with a blessing, and all you've got to do is be there and meet them at their level. I would hope that there is more patience and more words versus silence and horrible negative actions. And by that, I mean beatings. There's still kids that are just getting their butts whooped in the worst way when all you could have done is just given them the words, right? That's all they're looking for. So my last words are, we are men, but we're also human. We have hearts that are both soft and hard. We are learning how to do all of the things the right way. As a male, I'm sorry for the mistakes that we have made. And as an individual, I'm sorry for the mistakes that I have made. As a male, I will tell you that I possess all of the courage, all of the strength, all of the intellect, and all of the ability to overcome the things that are presented to me. And I believe in the men that are around me to do so because I'm in their space as well. So if you are a male and you're hearing this and you're alone, what I'll tell you is you're not alone. You're not the first, you won't be the last, but I believe in you to be the best person for yourself, to see yourself through. I could talk to you forever, but those are the words that I'd like to leave with you. And finally, because we're in this space, sometimes we have to provide grace. I'd like to thank my dad for all the gifts that he has given me. I'd like to thank him for the opportunities that he has spent with me. I'd like to say that I wish we had more and we could do more. There's still time, but I'd also like to say that you did good. You know, look where I'm at. So thank you for everything that you've done.
Well, I'm not as articulate as that. And being that I was a baby when my father passed, all I would like to think is that, and say, is that I think he loved deeply, and I'm thankful for that.
Did you have anything to add from final words? Or you want to, those, I mean, those are very powerful words in themselves, but did you have
Hands
a
of a
message
man,
for the
you think?
audience or anything?
No, not quite ready for that yet.
Okay.
But thanks, though.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's going to be hard to top kind of what Lee said. But I think if men are struggling out there right now, just know that it's okay to struggle. You don't need anyone to validate your pain. Your pain and your struggle is your own. It comes from your own existence. It comes from your own family. And as we mentioned many times in this show, the key is self-awareness. Don't be afraid to look inside. And it's going to be very, very tough when you look inside, especially for the first time. You're not going to like what you're going to find, right? And you're not going to like where it came from. In fact, you're going to have many, many, many questions about it. It's going to be very important to seek a strong sense of community, a strong sense of brotherhood, but also not to overly seek it too much, and to also listen to the voice from within in order to find your way. I mean, I can go on again and again, but I really love what you, again, reflecting what you said earlier about like talking to your child, and you can be talking to your own inner child and ask them, who do you want to be? Who do you want to show up as in this world? And what are you going to do to make it happen? And we don't always have to do it alone. Men often go through a lot of lone wolf syndrome. Just know that if you are, flowing and being from a natural state where you are truly being yourself and radiating who you are, the right people will show up into your life and will help you find your vision, and you will be there to help them find their vision too. So just remember to just attract, don't chase. Men always feel like they have to chase and hunt and gather. Don't, okay? Be yourself, be firmly, strongly rooted in who you are as a man and in your masculine, and it all will fall into place. I promise you, because I'm a living, breathing example of that right now.
Same.
And if I need to, if I'm going to have a conversation with my father, just like you're still around. And I think about you a lot, actually, all the time. Almost every time I see my son, I think about you. And I know that if you were to pass from this life and I didn't still make that bridge, that connection with you, even though it was not really my job, even though it's not my job, I still want to do it. And I know that you came from a very rough background, and everything that you came through, you're a refugee. You risked your entire life, even when you were younger than me, to come to this country, for me to be able to afford the life that I have here and the life that I'm lucky enough to give to my child. So I'm going to be forever grateful about that. But we can do better. I think we can have a better relationship. And I think together we can still do amazing things together. I want to see you as a bigger part of my life. I want to see you be a bigger part in my son's life. I know we live in a different city. But I just want to know that I've always felt you being there for me. I've felt your love for me in your own kind of way. And I just hope you know that I love you too.
Boom.
With that being said, I just want to thank, obviously the boys here at Stripe Studio, Al for helping out on sound. I want to thank Movember. I want to thank all of our sponsors, our wonderful sponsors, and you guys thanking, as the panelists, as men who showed up today. Like, put your heart out there fearlessly, and to Derek who has left already, but man, I'm fired up. Like, this is really cool. And again, one of our initial objectives earlier was to make sure that you guys get something from this, and not only get something from this, but continue this conversation past when we call cut on these cameras and past the month of November. We can't just wait until November every year, 1 month of the year, just to talk about this or virtue signal about this. This shit is real, right? This is the shit that we deal with every single day. And I'm not saying our problems are bigger or smaller than anybody else's problems, but man, like half the population on this earth is men,
Sure.
right? And there's problems that are unique to men, and we need to start talking about it. We need to start putting it out in the open. And to me, men always think sharing your story is weak. I want to put out the message out there that like being vulnerable and putting yourself out there and not giving a shit what anybody else thinks about you and sharing your story, that's power. That's strength.
Yep.
Okay, to be able to stand up there and not give a shit what anyone thinks about you, and to do it for the greater good and to help other people. I don't need to go out there and be hard.
No.
You know what I mean? I don't need to go out there and puff my chest out. You know, this is it.
This is good enough.
This is it.
Yeah.
So that's it, guys. I
Cheers.
really hope you guys enjoyed it. And
Thanks,
guys,
man.
thank you so
This is
much.
nice.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, support
Thank
team.
you.
Bye.